With a loud pop, the demon burst into nothingness surrounded by flames. Triumphantly, Billy turned to Paige. "You see, you were just overreacting," she bragged. The motion was sort of defeated when a vial flew inches from her ear. Turning, she saw a second demon finish vaporizing. "Right. Overreacting." Paige sighed. "How was I to know he had backup?" Billy pouted. "Honey, you weren't, but you should have at least suspected it." "At least we didn't need the power of 3, Billy began. "This time," Paige said. Her cell suddenly blared into life. Diving into her purse, she answered it, Paige Halliwell, as she and Billy orbed back to the manor. Billy didn't need to wait around long to be told off. Even before her feet had hit the landing, Piper was beginning the lecture. "Lecture," Billy blurted out, leaving Piper mid-rant as she continued down the stairs. "Yeah, well, come back tonight. I've got to finish scolding you." Piper shook her head. Being the oldest had its disadvantages. Billy wasn't even concentrating. To be honest, her mind kept wandering back to the recent events. During the last couple of months, every time she had got into any trouble, the sisters had needed to use the power of 3 to save her, stop the demon, or a combination of both. She sighed. Deep down, she wished that this power could have been hers and hers alone. But then she was also glad that the sisters were her safety net. Looking down at her absent-minded scribbling on the paper, she had inadvertently written down a question. Could the power of 3 belong to 1? The underworld was by no means a nice place to live. It might have had something to do with its occupants, but Gronders still clung on to the fact that all the bitter infighting and dying should have made it a lot more fun to live in. Instead, there were plotting factions and no good places to eat, and for a demon such as him, he needed good meals to devour. Striding through the halls, he felt the massive increase of power coming from a supposedly empty room. Peering into it, he saw a rather homely-looking woman muttering incantations into a swirling void. "What witchcraft is this?" he asked the homely woman. Turning, the woman began to glow. Her bland features melted away, revealing a stunning figure with long flowing black hair and piercing blue eyes. "My witchcraft?" She laughed. "And you are?" Gronders asked, unimpressed. "Luna, the jailer of souls." She smiled. "And what about you, fat man?" "Gronders, lord of the tormentors." Gronders boomed, rubbing his fat hand through his hair. His sandy complexion contrasted sharply with his stylish black suit. "Tormentors?" Luna asked, striding over to Gronders. She stared deep into his eyes, and Gronders felt her absorbing all the information in his skull. Within seconds, the fat demon fell to the floor, vanquished. "Well, when you don't have a soul, I'll just take your powers," Luna said, licking her bright red lips. "And now let's see where my prison break is heading now." Billy mooched back upstairs to the attic. The sisters had chewed her out good and proper. At least it was only them in the manor just now. The rest of the extended Halliwell family was away visiting the sisters' dad on Phoebe's recommendation. Perhaps she had sensed something. Billy wondered. Reaching the attic, Billy moved over to the Book of Shadows, turning the pages. She wasn't sure what she was looking for, only that she'd find it here. Luna smiled at the old crone who was staring at her. The look of disbelief on the old hag's face was enough to convince Luna that she may even keel over and die on the spot. "I vanquished you," the crone croaked. "Not well enough, apparently," Luna boasted. Reaching out, her hand shot out from within the mirror, dragging the old crone closer. Their faces close enough to be touching, the old crone tried one last incantation, but even as she opened her mouth, she found herself burning on the inside. Falling backwards, she tried to release the imprisoned demon's hands from hers, but as she fell backwards, she pulled the demon from the mirror and into the real world. As a final insult, Luna stepped over the fallen crone. "Nice soul. I'll take it," she said before her eyes glittered and the old crone disappeared. Turning her head towards the Halliwell manor, she smiled. "The power of 3 for 1. She breathed. Billy felt a shudder run down her spine. She looked again at the Book of Shadows. It often creeped her out. Closing the book, she decided it was just a pipe dream anyway. So she turned and headed downstairs. "What were you doing up there?" Piper asked. "Yeah, we get nervous when you plan things," Phoebe joked. "Leave her alone," Paige said, dumping down onto the couch beside the other two, bowl of popcorn in hand. "We have the house to ourselves for a couple of days, let's enjoy tonight. Isn't it still like 3 in the afternoon?" Piper laughed. "What do you care?" Phoebe puzzled. "Don't some of us still have to work?" "Not today. Today is sick day." Paige smiled. "Are you staying here or coming back later?" she asked Billy. "Later," Billy said before walking out the door. Sometimes the sisters were too weird. Luna grabbed the man from behind and broke his neck with a single twist. Taking his soul in with a single breath, she used the power she had stolen from Grondus to plant a tormentor in his body. Standing erect and straightening out its neck, the tormentor stood. "Take this to the blonde witch. Don't let her see you," she barked, handing the man shell a crystal and a piece of paper. Turning, the shell wobbled on its feet and then began to walk straight to Billy's dorm. Staring up at the sky, Luna began to use another ability she had stolen. She began to infect Billy's mind with self-doubt. Billy had gotten all the way to her dorm before she began to feel down. The same thing kept playing on her mind. At first she had thought it was jealousy, then ambition, back to jealousy, and finally she realized it was fear. The sisters, Piper especially, talked to her like she was a child, sometimes no older than the boys, and one of them was still in diapers. But without the power of 3, the sisters were the same as Billy, just ordinary witches, if there was such a thing. With a whoosh, she saw a young man being grabbed by the neck and dragged into an alleyway. Rushing to help him, she bounded into the blind alley only to see nothing. Hearing a clatter, she saw a black shape leap high onto the roof and leave the shivering shape of a young man with his neck broken. In the quiet of the alley, she heard a sharp clink as the shape dropped something as it fled. Moving to the sound, Billy found a sharp piece of crystal, shaped like a 3-sided pyramid, wrapped in a piece of oilcloth. She felt the crystal hum with power as she touched it, so she quickly wrapped it back up in the cloth, determined to show the sisters. Luna cackled as the tormentor told her of its ruse. With a click of her fingers, the tormentor then vanished in a dark haze. As Billy opened the door to her room, she dropped the crystal beside her computer and began to strip off. Almost naked, she ran quickly into the bathroom and turned on the shower. Letting the cold water heat up, she sat in just a pale blue bra and knickers, set looking at the crystal. Taking out her grandmother's diary, she began to search the pages until she came across a picture that looked similar. By this time, however, steam was rising from under the bathroom door, so grabbing her towel, Billy jumped into the shower. As soon as the young witch was safely engrossed in conditioning her hair, the crystal began to glow and Luna appeared. Grabbing the diary sitting on the desk, she began to use the old witch's power. Incanting softly, she changed the words on the page. Then, when she heard the young witch began to hum softly to herself, she channeled a spell into the crystal. Taking a step back, Luna faded into nothingness. Piper, Paige, and Phoebe sat together on the couch, buried under an enormous duvet, comfortable and warm. The movie over and TV unable to hold their interest, the sisters began to talk. "We really should stop being so hard on Billy," Paige said. "Yeah, it's because of her we can do this," Phoebe reminded. "But we still have to bail her out all the time," Piper countered. "We still have to use the power of 3 and we still have to fight demons. The only difference now is Billy does more of the groundwork." "Which is helping," the other two said in unison. "Okay, I'll try to stop reprimanding her all the time," Piper sighed. Billy stepped out of the shower and back into her bedroom, dry except for the towel around her head. Pulling on a loose pair of grey track pants and a long-sleeved tee, she returned to the crystal and her grandmother's diary. "A conduit crystal, yada yada yada," she half read out loud, pacing as she did so. Used to hold magical energy or combine spells, blah blah blah, is not good or evil and depends on its purpose, can be set up to do almost anything by someone with enough power. She concluded. Her grandmother often did this for artifacts she found. She tried to dissect them like Billy did. Not rely on old world-type descriptions from the Book of Shadows. I suppose, Billy mumbled out loud, running her hand up and down the surface of the crystal. Immediately her mind was back to the charmed ones. The power of 3, she could combine the sisters' powers and amplify them with her own. Her very own power of 3. She could let them finally retire for a normal life. Throwing on a pair of white sneakers and discarding the towel, Billy rushed out of the door. Paige and Phoebe were trying to convince the other as to who it should be to go and get the next tub of popcorn when Billy came bounding into the mansion. So somebody sure seems in a better mood. Paige laughed. I think I've got the solution to our final problem. Billy said, excited. Our final problem? Piper asked surreptitiously. You guys. Well, the power of 3. I think I've finally got a way for you guys to finally retire. Billy smiled. We tried that, remember? New identities. Phoebe stated. No, I've got a way to take your power, well, some of your power, and create a power of 3 that I can amplify with my own. So it'd be what? A power of 4? Paige asked. Sort of. Billy shrugged. Well, let's take a look at it. Piper said with a lot of skepticism. Drawing looks from Paige and Phoebe. Okay, maybe somebody else should do it first. I'll do it. I should be able to tell if there's any danger. Phoebe said. So where'd you find this, Billy? Paige asked as Billy passed the crystal to Phoebe. Some demon dropped it. Billy said as Phoebe unwrapped the oilcloth. Phoebe immediately dropped the oilcloth in fear. The crystal dropped onto the blanket and bounced beside the sisters' legs. It has to be a trap, Paige said. At once the charmed ones reached forward to try and brush the crystal away from them. But as each of the sisters touched the crystal, they were immediately pulled inside it. In a flash, the charmed ones were trapped inside the crystal with each of their faces showing on one side of the crystal each. The crystal then began to levitate off the sofa and towards Billy, who cartwheeled away from the floating crystal. Rather than chasing Billy, however, the crystal appeared to hang in midair. In a dark haze, Luna appeared in the main room of the mansion. Well, that was easier than expected, she said, taking the crystal in her hand. Holding it by its peak, she placed the flat bottom onto the top of a silver mace-like wand, leaving the sisters' heads each facing outwards from each other. Billy looked at Luna. The large woman seemed to resonate power, wearing her all-black dress that stopped at her knees. Billy looked at herself, wet hair in ragtails and all, and felt very insecure. As you should. Luna smiled. Billy immediately knew that her feelings, as well as the crystal, were because of this demon. I'm not afraid of you, Billy said, stepping toward Luna. Child, I have the charmed ones. I have no need for you anymore, Luna said. Well, vanquishing demons is what I do, so you've got me until I free the sisters, Billy said. Most of what you've learned about the crystal is true, child, Luna mocked. It really does have the ability to combine powers. And now I have the power of 3. Luna pointed the wand at Billy, who was immediately frozen to the spot. As well as their individual powers. Billy was then levitated up against the ceiling. Luna turned her back as Billy was released and crashed back onto the floor. Rising, Billy saw that Luna still had her back turned. Calling forth a lightning spell, she fired it at Luna, who turned and caught it without so much as even surprise on her face. Staring at Luna for another second, Billy took a deep breath and ran for the front door. Rushing towards the door, Billy held her arms out to push it open, only to have to try and backpedal as Luna orbed in front of her. Seeing no other opportunity, Billy leapt onto the landing and began to run up the stairs. Heading for the attic, she saw Luna appear in front of her. Throwing a smoke spell, Billy darted into one of the other rooms to hide and regroup. "Oh, come now, child, I have the power of 3. Luna mocked. "I can find you anywhere." She laughed as she orbed into the same room that Billy was hiding in. "And I find you here," she snorted. Billy looked around. She was in the boys' nursery. The child's bed along one wall, the changing table along the other, with the crib in the middle of the room and toys strewn around the floor. Billy looked for something that could be helpful but found nothing. If she had been in Paige or Phoebe's rooms, she could have at least found some vials. Turning to run again, Billy found herself frozen by a thrust of the wand. Inside, the crystal Piper's face winced as her power was again forcibly channeled from her. "And where do you think you're going?" Luna mocked. "You're in your room now." She gestured around. "All it needs is a little modification." Luna spun the wand and Billy felt the sisters' powers being drawn from them. Billy watched, horrified, as the changing table extended out and the crib melted into the floor and reformed around the child's bed, creating a bigger crib. Billy didn't like where this was going and was definitely thinking that being trapped in the wand was going to be preferable. "Seeing as you're the junior witch in training, I guess it's better if we take some of the stress away from you." Luna smiled wickedly. "Huggies," she commanded, and a half-open package of diapers appeared in her hands. This time it was Paige's turn to wince. Setting the package of unisex cruisers on the floor, Luna spun the wand again and the package seemed to swell outwards. "Pants," Luna commanded, and Billy found her pants had reappeared in Luna's hands. "Panties," Luna continued unrelentlessly, and Billy found herself naked from the waist down. Finally, Luna pointed the tip of the wand at the package of diapers, then at Billy. "Diaper," Luna said, stressing every syllable. Billy looked down disheartened. She could feel her legs being pushed outwards from the added bulk of the diaper, however she couldn't move them due to the fact that she was still frozen in place by Piper's power. The very fact that she could move her head meant, she hoped, that Luna's control over the sisters' powers was still less than absolute. "I'm sure you hope so," Luna taunted. Phoebe was wincing as Luna used her empathic abilities. "My control is not only absolute, it is unquestioned." She pointed the wand at Billy's midsection. "As you know, Piper could unfreeze certain body parts. Well, I can too. She could also make molecules force themselves apart and expand, which she usually used to blow up demons. Well, as I don't want to blow up my junior witch in training, I have just unfrozen your digestive tract and I'm expanding everything in your bowels. In fact, they should really be ready to pop by now," Luna commented. Billy couldn't feel anything. She was frozen. Not knowing what else to do to check, she turned her head downwards to inspect her own diaper. "Oh, you're not going to use it yet?" Luna smirked. Suddenly both Billy and Luna orbed back into the living room. Pointing the wand to one end of the living room, Billy found herself levitated to that corner of the living room. "Potty," Luna called. And the blue racing car Potty appeared in the opposite corner of the living room. Luna gave the wand a twist and the Potty increased in size. Billy didn't want to think at how accommodating it would be for her bottom, but she could guess at what was coming next. "I'm prepared to give my junior witch in training a sporting chance." Luna smiled. "You know that you're about to go. So all you have to do is make it to the Potty and this nightmare will be over for you. Fail and my tormentors are hungry." Luna laughed. "And don't think you can just take off your diaper. It's being levitated up and on." Luna smirked. Billy then found she could move. She was also involuntarily moving her bowels. At first, as she sprinted towards the Potty, she didn't know why she believed that Luna would keep her word, but she had to take that chance. If she behaved like a good captive, she might have a chance to stop Luna. It wasn't to be though, as Billy found herself filling her diaper for the first time since forever. The warm mess pulled at her diaper in oblique angles, causing it move in uncomfortable ways. The only respite that Billy had in the embarrassing ordeal was at least gravity was keeping most of the mess away from her skin. Suddenly Billy found herself orbed onto the changing table. The load in her diaper was suddenly pushed in and upwards by the hard contact of the plastic sheet beneath her legs. Billy gagged as she felt the mush spread around her most sensitive areas. Harness. Luna barked and Billy found herself webbed to the changing table by an expanded version of the boy's harness. Although she could move, Billy really wanted to try and avoid it because of the way her diaper was sitting. Pail, Luna commanded. Billy found the diaper pail sitting between her legs. Diaper. Luna spoke again. The soiled diaper around Billy's waist disappeared. Suddenly Billy found herself levitated off of the table. Then she felt water orb underneath her. Staring at the wand, Billy could see her reflection, but more importantly she could see the strain on the faces of the sisters as their powers were used again and again. Firstly to orb the water, then to levitate it and Billy, and then to expand and contract the water so she was cleaned without being touched. Billy fought back the tears as the water disappeared and Billy was deposited back onto the cold plastic of the changing table. You are still a bit damp. There's no point giving your diaper extra work to do. Luna taunted. She pointed the wand at Billy, who found herself once again frozen to the spot. Motioning with her hands, Luna called forth a tormentor, and although Billy couldn't see it, Grondaz's face briefly flickered in the crystal beside the sisters. Tormentors were the worst kind of imps in the underworld. Unlike most demons, they fed off negative emotions. Also, unlike most, once they fed, their power was then withdrawn from them and passed into their master. It was the reason that Grondaz had become so fat, but with them powering the wand, Luna could use them to draw the power of 3 almost continuously. Tormentors had no fixed form, though their normal was a black shadow-like creature with 2 beady sliver eyes. However, they could react to their surroundings and take on almost any form, save for their eyes, which would always remain a haunting silver. Tormentors were not as mindless as imps, which was one of the reasons they were feared more. They were vicious, scheming and nasty, and these were traits that Luna would only encourage. As the tormentor approached Billy, its darting eyes absorbed her predicament and its body contracted on itself, rearranging into a young girl, maybe 9 or 10. She had long sandy hair and wore what was very close to an Alice in Wonderland costume except in red. Stepping beside Luna, the tormentor bowed her head. "No, you need to be older to be a babysitter." Luna spoke quietly. The tormentor began to age and grow until it appeared to be around 16. The costume remained in a similar theme except that the skirt got shorter and the blouse underneath became tighter, as if to emphasize a blossoming teen. "Perfect." Luna smiled. "Wipes." She ordered, and a quarter-full package of baby wipes appeared in her hands. "I'll let you finish diapering my junior witch in training," she said, turning, "and don't make it pleasant for her." Luna laughed as she orbed a throne into the nursery. Sitting upon it, she held out the package of baby wipes. Taking the package of baby wipes, the tormentor turned towards Billy, who now found herself unfrozen. Kicking her legs apart, she tried to think of any spell that could get her out of this, but with her hands harnessed down by her waist she would have to verbalize the spell, and at this particular moment in time she couldn't really concentrate on thinking one up. Trying to buck herself off of the changing table, Billy became more and more desperate, and as she did so the tormentor appeared to be growing more and more powerful. Realizing the full futility of her situation, Billy stopped and sagged her head. This was going to be horrendous. "Oh, don't stop, Junior." The tormentor laughed as it approached Billy. "The more you squirm, the more I like it." Billy winced with each movement of the baby wipe. The smell filled her nostrils and the texture of the wipe was creepily gentle. As her legs were lowered, Billy realized that the tormentor had finished with her behind. Shuddering at this thought, Billy tried to clamp her legs together. The tormentor simply moved its fist from holding her ankles together, pushing them apart with 3 fingers. Even though the demon only held her ankles together with its thumb and pinky, Billy could still not kick free of its grasp. As the demon slid its free hand down the inside of her thigh, Billy felt what she thought was utter humiliation. "I don't think it's a good idea for babies to have hair down here," the tormentor stated. "That's a good point," Luna agreed. "Don't you agree, Junior?" she taunted Billy. Billy had no answer for either of the demons. Well, at least one that was going to help her plight. "I asked you if you agreed with your nanny. If you can't answer, Junior, then I can only deduce that you have no objections." Luna smiled. She lifted the wand and spun it around. As the baby wipes moved over her, Billy could only watch with dismay as her hair was removed. She had been wrong before. This was utter humiliation. "Good job." Luna nodded to the tormentor, which disappeared in a black haze. "Now I guess we have to go for the finishing touch." Luna smiled. "Diaper," she commanded, and Billy found herself once again in overgrown Huggies. As Billy found herself levitated into a standing position, she saw her reflection in the crystal. She looked helpless, like an infant in fact. Her hair had dried raggedly, her top was old and worn, the harness constricted her movements and kept her hands pressed down by her sides, and her diaper was fastened snugly around her waist. Even the white sneakers on her feet looked childish now. As Luna raised the wand to Billy, there was a knock at the door. Levitating Billy into the crib, Luna orbed downstairs, leaving the helpless witch to wallow in self-pity. To Phoebe it appeared as if the darkness was subsiding. Continuing her track towards the apparent light source, she found herself staring at a ring of floating bodies surrounding what appeared to be a mirror. In the middle of the ring, Piper and Paige floated with their jaws wide with astonishment. "What's going on?" Phoebe asked. "Billy is being tormented by this demon so she can use our powers constantly," Piper stated. "But I don't feel anything," Phoebe said, puzzled. "We're not really here," Piper explained. "From what we've been able to gather." She gestured to the other light sources. "This demon has got us imprisoned in her wand. She calls herself Luna, the jailer of souls, and she uses the souls she's trapped for her own devices. Basically, she's using our powers and our knowledge to punish Billy," Paige added. "Can it be that bad?" Phoebe asked. "See for yourself," Piper said, moving to the side so Phoebe could see the mirror. Phoebe watched as Billy was diapered, then levitated into a giant crib, whilst harnessed so she couldn't move, and left by the demon. "That's horrible," Phoebe gasped. "Yeah, well, that's the nice stuff," Piper shuddered. "And the worst part is," Paige began, "that she's stuck in our house. Even though the boys are away, we've still got plenty of their clothes lying around." "Oh no," Phoebe gasped. "What happens if she finds our old stuff in the attic? Nobody should ever be forced to wear those sailor suits again." Piper shuddered. "And all of our old booties, mittens, and those plastic pants." "Stop," Phoebe said, shaking her head. "What if this demon can hear us?" Suddenly the sisters felt very worried for the young witch. Luna disguised herself as Paige and answered the door. It was some random salesman with the latest in vacuum technology. So powerful that it could lift up a bowling ball. "Well," Luna had started, "I do love power." She smiled as she drained the man of his soul. Billy found herself stuck on her knees. As soon as Luna had dropped her, she had slipped on the plastic and tumbled forward. The crib walls were too high to climb out of, and she couldn't use magic to leap out of them because the bars stopped to close to the ceiling. What was worse was that when she had tumbled forward, Billy had found she had to slither across to the crib wall, push her chest against it to climb up. This had begun to work her diaper lower on her body, so the only way she could pull it back up was to go back onto her knees and stay there. At least with the demon gone, she could begin plotting a spell to get her out. Before her mind could really get to work, Billy found herself orbed into the attic. Staring at the Book of Shadows longingly, Billy found herself frozen to the ground. "It appears that the Charmed Ones don't like you very much, Junior," Luna laughed. They have just told me where to find some good old-fashioned girly girl clothing for you. Luna spun the wand at old wardrobe in the back of the attic. As they parted, a couple of musty-looking chests came into view. The chests then sprung open and lines of baby clothing, enough for all three sisters, began to levitate out of the chests and land neatly in a rows in front of Billy. Pinks, polka dots, yellows, lilacs, and strawberry reds were all present in clothes that would be much too small to fit, but Billy knew that wouldn't really be a problem. After all, the diaper bunching around her waist had come out of a normal package. Billy then saw baby equipment the boys had outgrown orb in front of her just long enough for Billy to see it and wince before it orbed somewhere else. Reappearing in the living room, Billy found she could move. However, she was now in the playpen in the corner of the room. Luna walked up to the bars of the pen. "Harness," she commanded, and Billy found that she was once again able to move her arms. Luna then smiled. "I've been thinking of the best way to ensure that my junior witch in training doesn't get too big for her britches and try to start casting spells against me," Luna informed Billy. "And of course I've come up with a perfect solution," she said, holding up a pair of mittens connected via a length of cord in one hand. In the other she held a pacifier. Letting go of the two objects, they both stopped in mid-air, whether frozen or simply levitated Billy didn't know. All she knew that whatever power Luna had over messing with people's heads, she was using now because she could concentrate on nothing else. Luna then picked up her wand and spun it at the two garments. "Pacifier," she commanded, and Billy found the pacifier between her lips and clipped onto her shirt via a pink Minnie Mouse clip. "Mittens," Luna spoke again. This time Billy found her hands placed inside the white mittens and the cord was placed underneath her shirt. Suddenly Billy's head became clear. Not caring about mittens or pacifiers, she aimed a lightning bolt spell at Luna. The mittens sparked as the lightning discharged, but they did not rip. Instead, Billy watched as the lightning traveled up from one mitten across the cord and down through the other. Without warning, Billy's gloved hand raised itself up and planted itself firmly against the back of her diaper. Billy looked at her padded hand as if it had betrayed her. She had just spanked herself, hard. She turned to glower at Luna, who simply smirked, causing Billy's anger to boil over. Spitting out the pacifier, Billy began to chant an incantation. As she reached the climax of the spell, she found pacifier hovering just inches from her lips. Her eyes wide, she watched as the end of the pacifier began to glow. Suddenly it shot into her mouth and Billy felt the jolt of a spell run through her. It was then she found herself wailing. Not an adult cry, but a helpless babyish cry that was so immature that Billy just felt so little, stupid and helpless, and the tears came as she subsided to deep gulping breaths. Billy then found herself orbed right in front of Luna, who took hold of her diaper and checked it. "A spanked ass, a little cranky tantrum, but there's nothing downstairs." Luna smiled, releasing the waistband of Billy's diaper and giving it a pat. "Maybe what you need is a makeover." Luna smiled. A dark haze filled the living room, and as three tormentors were summoned into the living room. In their shadow forms they stared at Billy with their unblinking silver eyes. Then they began to reform. Their bodies shrunk down and moved into the colored spectrum. Each tormentor began to morph into preteen girl. The first became a small blonde girl about 11 or 12, wearing a black and white striped crop top and white pants. The second tormentor sprouted mousy brown hair from underneath a green-colored straw hat. She was wearing a summery outfit consisting of a dual-cut top with a soft green stripe along the top. It was white underneath the green stripe and finished just above the tormentor's 3/4-length green pants. The last tormentor molded itself into a girl slightly older than the other two. Possibly 13 or 14, not much older, but a definite amount. This tormentor transformed itself into a having red hair, hung in pigtails, whilst wearing a white USA Soccer shirt and pink track pants. The demons then rounded on a still frozen Billy, eyeing her with haunting silver eyes. The two younger tormentors then swiped at Billy's legs, knocking her down to their size, whilst the oldest grabbed at Billy's top. Ripping it off of Billy's back, the redhead then stuffed the top down the back of Billy's diaper. Tears formed in Billy's eyes as she was forced to stand in front of Luna in nothing but a bra and a diaper. With the amount of use those diapers are going to get, I think it'll be better if Junior can't actually remove them. Luna smiled. Pointing the wand at Billy, she began to chant. Your powers are nullified in those baby clothes. They feed energy to me, so my magic grows. I'll now abuse the power of 3. And bond you into diapers, you helpless baby. Billy found herself awash with magical energy. Staring down at her diaper, it seemed to fasten itself to her skin, like egg sticking to an unoiled frying pan. Sliding her mittened hand against the waistband of the diaper, Billy found she was completely unable to pull it away from her skin. She lifted her head up to glower at Luna, but all she found instead were the 3 tormentors staring at her. Now that she could move, however, Billy wasn't exactly going to hang around and wait to see what they had planned. Turning, she started to sprint for the door. Baby bouncer, Luna commanded. Billy tried to force what had just happened out of her mind. She knew, deep down, that she had just been placed in a baby bouncer, and whilst her feet hit the ground and the bungee cords hadn't gone slack yet, she wasn't hopeful of how long that situation would last for. As the cords went tight, Billy found herself being propelled backwards and up. Her back slapped against the ceiling before she was dumped unceremoniously onto her face on the floor. The cords then tightened up more and Billy found her feet lifted to just off the floor, meaning she was once again captive. Now I think it might be best if you stop running away all the time, Luna mocked, moving inches from Billy's face. Billy tried to kick and punch forward, but the baby bouncer held her too rigidly beneath her arms and her legs too high off the ground, so she ended up performing a cycling motion in mid-air. Now, temper. Luna smiled. If you're getting cranky, then perhaps you have a fever. And you don't want me checking for one of those, do you? Luna asked. Billy thought on this for a second, then stopped. Good baby, Luna patronized. Turning to the tormentors, Luna laughed. We will have to go shopping to get somebody some more diapers. She jerked her head back to Billy. Whatever you dress her in will be fine. But is she so sad? Perhaps you should dress her in something special to lift her spirits. Luna affected concern as she orbed out of the room. Piper, Phoebe, and Paige clung to each other as the power of 3 was forcibly drawn from them. Convulsing, Paige felt like she was on fire as her greatest gift was used to demean her young charge again. We have to stop this, Phoebe said, recovering first. That's pretty obvious, Piper stated flatly. But how? We're not even here, we're just some memories. We don't know where our bodies are, and apparently our souls are somewhere different. Paige shrugged, exasperated. Perhaps I could be of assistance, a blonde-haired fat man asked. The 3 tormentors crowded around Billy. She hung her head in shame as the abominations unceremoniously dumped her out of the baby bouncer and onto the floor. Despite their small size, the demons were blessed with the usual increased strength and stamina. Finding a pair of hands down her diaper, Billy started to turn around only to have another set of hands clamp around her waist and hold her steadily in place. Taking the ripped top out of Billy's diaper, the tormentors held it up in front of Billy. I don't think she can really wear this again, the redhead told the others. You're right, the other 2 agreed. Oh well, I guess we had better go up to Junior's nursery and get her ready to go. Charmed Part 2. Billy was then frog-marched from the living room to the boys' nursery wearing nothing but her pale blue bra, mittens, and a diaper. Each step she took was accompanied by an immature crinkle as the scaled-up diaper bunched between her legs and causing the cover to crinkle. Once into the nursery, Billy was told to stand in front of the changing table. The tormentor with the green hat had given Billy's arm a hard enough squeeze that the young witch had decided to comply rather than be seriously injured. Rummaging through the neatly folded piles of baby clothes, the tormentors drew out a couple of different suggestions for Billy, but they kept their backs to their captive so Billy couldn't see what they had taken hold of. After a very brief conversation in muffled voices, Billy found the three demons turning around together, each holding a different garment of clothing. Pouncing on Billy, who found herself knocked onto her back with a jarring thud, the tormentors pulled on the baby clothing, which seemed to expand as it was pulled over Billy's body so it fitted perfectly. Well, perfectly for the tormentors, Billy thought. Being dragged forward so her neck was forced forward, Billy had to strain her neck whilst the demons fixed her hair. She doubted they would put any makeup on, and Billy could guess that the only accessories she'd have would be her pacifier and diaper bag. The tormentors allowed Billy to draw her neck back in. She stared down at the outfit she had been dressed in. Biting back tears, Billy stared at the bright red strawberry shortcake dress. The large frilly white collar seemed to be the only decal on the dress, which was plain white, and the skirt only extended down far enough to cover the top half of Billy's diaper. On her feet were a pair of black patent leather Mary Jane shoes with the T-bar buckle securely fastened over brilliant white socks that extended up to her calves. Finding her pacifier being pushed between her lips, Billy watched as the pacifier was clipped to her chest via a Minnie Mouse holder. Touching her hands to her head, Billy found a large bow that forced her hair down around her head, with the front of her hair forced down so it gave her a childish straight fringe just above her tweezed eyebrows. Pulling her hands either way, Billy found that the cord attached to her mitts was threaded underneath her dress and out through the arm loops, making her the perfect baby doll. Only she wasn't a baby, and being the epitome of cute did not please her whatsoever. She spun as she felt Luna orbing back into the room, and her dress flew up, revealing all of her diaper to the room. "Well, aren't you sweet?" Luna mocked. Turning to the tormentors. "Now we have to go out and buy some diapers for Junior, so you will have to come with me." Luna smiled. "But I don't want you to attack the general population. Instead, I want you to make sure that our Junior, which in training here, is as uncomfortable as possible. So don't forget her diaper bag," Luna said as she orbed everybody out of the room. Being bonded into the diaper meant Billy had little or no chance of removing it. And even as she was transported through time and space to her destination, she could feel the pressure on her bladder growing. Unbeknownst to her, Luna was increasing the volume in the young witch's organ, but even that wouldn't had improved Billy's mood. Reappearing in her local mall, Billy allowed her head to sink downwards. She didn't want to make eye contact with anybody, especially as there was a high chance that she would meet more than one person she knew. First, she would have to suffer being made to wander around dressed like a baby. Then Luna would probably force herself to reveal she was a witch, and with the tormentors there, Billy knew her embarrassment would increase threefold. Strangely, even as she crinkled through the mall, Billy wasn't receiving that much attention. Stealing glances upwards, she saw that whilst she drew some stares, most people hardly took any notice. Or at least were trying not to take any notice. As Luna silently guided Billy around the mall and into the main shopping center, the volume of people increased, as did the stares and whispering. With the pressure on her bladder increasing exponentially, Billy tried to force herself to forget about the pressure and concentrate on remaining dry and saving herself a lot of embarrassment. However, as the pressure increased to an almost unbearable level at the shoe section of the mall, Billy's pace began to slow up too much for Luna's liking. Turning to Billy and crouching down, as one would do when talking to a toddler, Luna affected a cross face. "Now what's wrong, Junior? Do you need something? Or do you just want to stare at some new shoes? Because I'm sure one of the ladies will be able to help you find some nice new ones." Luna patronized in that stupid way people speak when addressing a baby. Billy looked up at the workers in the shoe department. Far from being ladies, they were instead 16-year-old girls with smirks on their faces. Billy shook her head and tried to keep pace with Luna. Very shortly, Billy again found herself lagging behind the demon, and the tormentors who had been keeping pace began to drop back behind Billy and push her, so she stumbled forward. With her head down, Billy was forced to stumble along. With one misplaced step, Billy's toe found herself stubbing harshly on the edge of a mirror that she hadn't seen. Billy winced because as she had stumbled to prevent herself from landing face first on the floor, she had overstepped, and now the pressure on her bladder was effectively easing the hard way. In the reflection of the mirror, she watched as an increasing damp patch appeared along the bottom of her diaper. Praying that no one noticed, Billy knew that was idiot optimism, as her skirt had never been near to covering that far down, and as she walked, Billy could feel the increased weight on her diaper pulling it further down. She was, now, able to step back up and keep pace with Luna, who Billy could see was offering her a condescending smile to the young witch as they walked along. "Hey cutie." A boy from one of Billy's classes laughed. "You appear to be in need of something." Billy looked up at the boy's face, and behind her pacifier offered him a snarl. Of course the childish garment somehow made the gesture meek and placid, but Billy felt a little better about until. "Aren't you going to thank this man for telling you, Junior?" Luna asked. "Yeah, Junior." The three tormentors sang together, giggling. Billy contorted her face as she stared at the boy. "Thank you," she gurgled behind the pacifier, biting each word out. "Well done, Junior," Luna mocked. "She's been practicing her manners." Luna smiled proudly. If only she could practice going to the potty. The boy laughed. "Yes, that would be a help." Luna guffawed. "See you on Monday." The boy smiled at Billy, giving her cheek a pinch. Billy felt the tears come forth now. That was humiliation of the highest order. It was one thing to run around with full diaper in privacy, but a wet one in public was worse, and Billy knew there were only two things that could top it. And she wanted neither. Seeing how Luna hadn't thought to restrain her in any way, Billy began to look up. Although this meant she could see the judging faces of the people in the store more clearly, she could also plan out how far she would have to run when she chose her moment. Looking down again, Billy realized she was slightly thankful that the tormentors hadn't put her in booties, because the Mary Janes should afford her a bit more support once she was running. Being thankful for small mercies was all Billy could take from her present situation, especially as she was directed down the diaper aisle. Billy had hoped it would be deserted, but there was a crowd at the bottom of the aisle of people who had clearly been informed of Billy's predicament and wanted to see for themselves. She could even hear the click of camera cells going off as she guessed that she would be an internet celebrity by the end of Close Tonight. She glared up at the store's security cameras before returning her gaze to Luna, who was standing in front of Billy with a package of diapers in her hands. The package of convertibles that Luna held in her hands began to swell slightly as the demon pumped magic into it. The outward designs remained mostly the same, however the size chart changed, so it read, "Sabrina, for all junior witches," and the baby on the front began to age considerably. Billy kept her gaze constant and tried to stare through the package. Satisfied that she had held the package up long enough so that all the camera-happy crowd could get their pictures, Luna thrust the package of diapers at Billy and with a large sigh waited until her captive took hold of the package. Turning towards the crowd in the aisle, Luna began to meander down it, looking for some other products for Billy. With Luna turning her back, the tormentors did the same. Sensing this was her chance, Billy hurled the package at Luna as hard as she could and was rewarded with the demon being knocked off of her feet. Sprinting down the aisle, Billy ignored the tormentors as they tried to grab her, lifting herself over them with a flip. Darting forward, she headed into the crowd, who parted when they saw the desperation on the girl's face. And although some tried to stop her, Billy wasn't letting a couple of hands stopping her from escaping. Rushing through the crowd, Billy watched as Luna pulled herself to her feet and motioned for the tormentors to start after her. Reaching the checkouts, Billy didn't stop to get held up by the lines. She simply jumped onto an unmanned station and cart-wheeled back onto the floor, causing her skirt to fly up around her face, but it did nothing anyway, so the young witch didn't care. Her Mary Jane shoes squeaked as they came into contact with the mall floor, and as the tormentors tore after her by jumping from wall to wall and running in unnatural ways after her, Billy knew that most people would either be talking about what they saw or would hear about it. Billy had just begun to open up a lead away from the tormentors. After all, no matter what running abilities they had in a straight sprint, they were still smaller than Billy, and she was rounding a corner when heard Luna yell across the mall. "You're being very bad, Junior." Billy gritted her teeth as her mittens gave her but a good pounding, but rather than stop she used every stinging swat to try and force herself onwards. Fortunately she didn't begin crying behind the pacifier. Unfortunately, however, Billy found her dress becoming heavier. At first it pushed Billy off balance, but as she was leaning forward anyway, this wasn't a major problem. However, the weight continued to pile onto the dress, and as it wasn't long enough to even cover her diaper when she saw sprinting Billy became increasingly top-heavy. So much in fact that she began stumbling forward. Despite this, Billy kept kicking her legs and managed to keep the tormentors from breaching the lead she had over them. Finally, though, the weight of the dress became too much and forced Billy to the ground. Kicking out with her feet, Billy began to try and crawl as quickly as she could away from the tormentors. Knowing that the door to the mall was just around the corner spurred Billy on and gave her enough strength within her thin arms to hold off the weight of her dress from forcing her to a complete stop on the ground. As she rounded the corner on all fours, Billy found that all that separated her from the outside world was two sets of legs. Each wore the standard issue mall security grey slacks, and as Billy tried to bundle past them she found herself being pulled upright by the sleeves of her dress. The two security guards held her underneath her arms and left Billy kicking her legs out to try and find some traction even though she was off the ground. Billy even tried a few futile kicks at the security guards, but they held her firm. "Let me go." Billy squirmed. "Aren't you a cutie?" One of the security guards cooed at Billy. It was then that behind the obligatory Ray-Bans Billy saw that both of the guards had the silver eyes of tormentors. "Let me go." She struggled again. "But you've had a little whoopsie." The other tormentor smiled. "Maybe we should take you back to Mummy. You've got such an affinity with kids." The first tormentor smiled to his partner. Billy kicked and bucked like a mule, but the demon's arms stayed tight under her armpits, seemingly unfazed by the substantial weight of the dress. They lifted Billy between them as if she was nothing. As Billy was carried through the store, she began to slip down slightly from the guard's grip. Far from being a sign of the guards weakening, their grips remained constant. It instead caused Billy's dress to ride up higher, revealing the extent to which she had wet her diaper. The core between her legs was nearly solid with liquid and was in quite a bit of danger of leaking. She heard voices coming up behind, and shortly Billy was staring at three familiar faces. "We could have caught her," the oldest teen tormentor moaned. "But you're just a kid yourself. And you don't send a child to do an adult's job," the first security guard tormentor mocked. "We were just about to catch her at the door to stop her from hurting herself. You've been forced to carry her all the way." The green-hatted tormentor sighed. "Well, don't worry about it. If you want a piggyback, you can go next." The second security guard smiled. Billy couldn't believe what she was hearing. The tormentors were actually fighting over her. As if she was a trophy or a prize. This wasn't a good thing, but perhaps it could be used to her advantage when she made her move to escape. It wasn't like she'd be getting that chance soon, however, as Billy felt a strong hand underneath her diaper, and as she was levitated up slightly, Billy knew she would be shortly face to face with Luna. With Luna's hand underneath her diaper, it must have looked as if the demon was carrying with as little difficulty as one would have carrying an infant. Billy found the arms of her dress tightening slightly as she was pulled in against Luna's chest. The young witch's legs were then frozen and pulled up around Luna's hips, so it looked like she was cuddling into the demon. The bow of her head then began to increase in weight as well, forcing Billy's head down onto Luna's shoulder. Lifting her eyes up to Luna's face, Billy was greeted by only a mocking smile so omnipotent it made her toes curl. "I think your little ones had a little whoopsie," one of the security guards stated. Billy could no longer see the guards as her head was almost clamped to Luna's shoulder. Billy felt her diaper being squeezed underneath her. "She is very wet. I don't want her to get diaper rash again," Luna announced loudly whilst hiking up Billy's skirt, exposing her entire diaper. "Is it a common problem?" the other guard asked. "Oh, you saw how Junior likes to run," Luna explained. "If she's carrying a load, then I have to wait until I can catch her to change her." "I understand." The guard laughed. I know how difficult it is with little ones. He must have done something to the tormentor in the green hat because she yelped slightly. But the girls are such a big help. Luna smiled. Yeah, we dress Junior and everything. The girls chimed. Sometimes though it's better just to rely on adults. For instance, maybe you could have put a couple of these three down for a nap whilst you went shopping. It would have been so much easier to hang on to Junior. The tormentors were very openly in fighting now. Thanks for the suggestion, but no. Luna snapped once again, cracking the whip to show she still wielded it. Billy then found herself moving, darting her eyes about. She heard Luna's high-heeled clack on the mall floor. As Billy became disorientated due to her lack of anything but her peripheral vision, the young witch just shut her eyes and prayed for a quick end. This of course wasn't to be. Are you tired, Junior? Well, you did do a lot of running about. Don't worry, you can have a nap when we get you home. Luna cooed, snapping Billy's eyes back open. Billy then found her back dropping down slightly, and as she gasped around her pacifier, she felt herself being dropped onto a bench. The bench was a circular metal contraption around a plastic tree, ironically put there to give the mall more natural life, and as Billy's dress came in contact with the corrugated iron, she heard it groan slightly against the weight. Finding herself looking at Luna and the three girls, Billy's eyes darted from each. She wasn't exactly in a prime position to fight them off at the moment. Looking to their hands, Billy saw the tormentors each had something in their hands that spelled trouble. The tormentor dressed in black and white held a bag that Billy guessed could only be a diaper bag. The tormentor with the green hat held the package of diapers that Billy had flung at Luna, and the tormentor in the soccer top was holding onto a plastic mat. Glancing about, Billy knew what was coming next and she didn't like it. Trying to pull herself upwards, Billy realized that she couldn't even move her head. The weight of what she was wearing was so intense. Looking at Luna, she saw that she was holding what was worst of all, her wand. Luna then tapped her wand gently against the ground. For Billy, that sound seemed magnified, but the rest of the mall appeared to have its volume turned down. She could hear her own slightly panicked breathing and heart was beating loud in her chest, but the usual hustle and bustle of the crowd was gone. The bench creaked with relief as Billy levitated from it slightly. Being held inches above the ground, Billy was forced to watch as the changing mat was slid underneath her. The tormentor's sandals squeaking on the floor. As Billy was settled back down onto the changing mat, she felt her legs stick slightly to the mat. Her exertions from running had made her sweat slightly, and the plastic was readily sticking to that. Every move Billy now made was now accompanied by an orchestra of crinkles as the sounds felt magnified in Billy's ears. Luna then took the package of diapers from the tormentor and tore it open. The tearing sound was almost deafening to Billy, who shook her head to try and clear her ears. Oh, poor baby is getting fidgety. The soccer tormentor mocked. She then moved over to beside Billy and placed her hand on top of Billy's stomach. Coochie coo, she mocked. Suddenly Billy felt like she was being electrocuted. Every time the tormentor touched her stomach, Billy felt jolts of electricity jolt out from the demon's fingertips. Billy had no choice but to try and squirm. She even yelped behind the pacifier, but the gurgling sound closely resembled that of a giggle, so Billy knew she wasn't going to receive much help. Respite did come though, however, from an unlikely source. Luna shooed away the tormentor and with a diaper in one hand motioned for the diaper bag to be brought to her. Billy gritted her teeth and prayed for Luna to get on with it. Opening the diaper bag, Luna opened a lined pocket. Billy wondered what that was for, and then pulled out a packet of baby wipes out of another. Using the excessive weight around Billy's head and shoulders, Luna hardly even needed her demon's strength to move Billy's legs up into the air. Although Billy was not offering much resistance in the hope that this would speed her change. Luna methodically untaped Billy's diaper and balled it up. She then took the soaked garment and placed it into the lined pocket of the diaper bag. Billy silently scolded herself for not guessing what it was for, but also wondered why on earth Luna didn't just send one of the tormentors to the bin with it. Now exposed to the mall, Billy watched helplessly as Luna opened the baby wipes and carefully drew one out. Piper stared at the fat demon. Everything he said made sense, but he was a demon. It made believing him more difficult even if what he said was logical. So we are trapped in this demon's wand, with you and everybody else whose souls she's stolen? Piper questioned. That's right. Gronders said. You've got to forgive Piper, she has a hard time believing demons. Phoebe smiled. I've got good reason to be this way. Piper shot back. But from what you've said, we don't really have emotions here. Paige asked. That's right, your powers are being drawn out from you. Gronders stated. You felt that? He justified to Piper. And what happens is the rest of you get transferred to here. For demons like myself who have no souls, we end up just floating here whilst our powers are used. Once our usefulness is expended, we simply vanish. Sometimes Luna keeps our power, other times she just abandons it. Gronders sighed. People like you, however, she can't absorb fully, hence why she's called the Jailer of Souls. She can keep you locked up and abuse your powers, but she can't steal them completely. So how do we stop her? Phoebe asked hopefully. Wait a minute. Piper said, her gaze narrowing. If there are so many hundreds of souls, where are they all? It's just us here. Gronders regarded Piper for a moment. His mouth showed shock and awe, but his eyes showed sadness. Lifting his arm up, he left a shimmering residue behind it. I don't see it. Piper stated. She felt Paige nudge her in the ribs. Look again. Her sister growled. This time Piper watched as Gronders lifted his arm. In the glowing trail following his arm, Piper could make out a swirling mass. Again Gronders moved his arm and Piper saw that the swirling mass wasn't some strange fluid like she'd originally believed she was floating in. No, instead she could now make out hundreds of faces staring at her in the tiny piece of light from Gronders's arm. Turning her gaze around her, Piper saw that there was enough space in this cavernous place to be full of millions, if not billions of souls. Watching her own luminance, Piper watched as she lifted and fell with what she had originally seen as the tides of the liquid was instead hundreds of souls trying to make her see them rushing at her at once. She looked at Paige and Phoebe, both with tears in their eyes. Piper touched her cheek and realized that she too was crying. They had to find a way out of this, and soon. Billy winced as the final baby wipe was drawn over her skin. It wasn't the texture of the cloth that made her wince, but with the sounds all around her being subdued, she was forced to listen to her own harsh breathing. With the lack of ambient noise from the mall, Billy retreated inside, her mind desperately searching for every tidbit of information she knew about her captor and her imps. And unfortunately that wasn't much, so instead she found herself pondering her situation and wishing that her next diaper change, as due to the hopelessness of her situation she was sure that there would be a next change, would at least be in the privacy of a nursery or restroom. She shuddered at the thought that this should bring her some consolation. Finally Luna took the diaper in her hand and pulled it under Billy. Bringing out baby powder, she deftly powdered the young witch and then fastened the thick diaper around Billy's waist. Billy guessed she should have been at least grateful for a clean diaper as the noise from the mall began to pick up and the world seemed to shift back to normal. Finding the weight of her dress subsiding, Billy was made to sit up and stare into Luna's eyes. You look hungry. Luna smiled. It wasn't a nice gesture. Well, you shouldn't need changed, and I bet you sleep a whole lot better with a full tummy. She teased, crinkling her nose at Billy, who had to restrain a curse. Picking Billy up and dropping her back onto her feet, Luna placed a hand at Billy's back and pushed her own wards. Billy screwed her face slightly as increased the length of her paces and turned to glower at Luna, who simply responded with the word harness. Billy felt the blue nylon orb around her dress and she could feel the reins being drawn up behind her. Well, I don't want to lose you again, Luna taunted. The three tormentors quickly surrounded Billy. The demons would take it in turns to try and grab her hands and pull them into the arm restraints. At first Billy had no trouble in fending off the abominations, but they became more and more persistent. From simple "look over there" taunts, they started messing with the cord around her mittens and her pacifier. Fighting back spell after spell, Billy was forced to try and fend off the tormentors whilst once again becoming a public spectacle as Luna steered her up towards the food court. As the demons finally pulled one of Billy's mittens into the arm restraints, Billy found herself being hoisted up by Luna, who pressed the young witch against her hip. Taking one look into Billy's startled face, Luna licked her lips. "What a good idea," she said, examining Billy's mitten. She removed both of her hands from Billy, who stayed floating against her hip, whilst Luna quickly harnessed Billy's free hand against her waist. "Oh, don't pout, Junior," Luna threatened, returning one hand to underneath Billy's diaper. "Or I will give you something to pout about." Billy tried to suck in her lip, but it was hard. She was fighting a cavalcade of differing emotions, not least the embarrassment of having to wander around with both her mittens fastened to her waist, making her look like she was waddling around with her hands permanently on her hips. Reaching the top of the escalator, Billy was returned to the floor and nudged towards the food court. She could feel a sense of dread and foreboding. Upstairs in this mall there was a creche, and she felt pretty sure that she would end up diapered besides real babies before very long. Stealing a quick glance at the tormentors, Billy knew they suspected the same. "Now girls, I am going to find Junior and myself a seat. Why don't you go and join the queue?" Luna ordered. She hadn't asked that as a question. Slightly disappointed to be passing the creche, the tormentors obediently joined the queue of dinner time patrons. Although the mall was busy, the food court was packed. Moving over to the children's play area, Luna wandered up to a table where a family was sitting. It was clear they were just about to sit down, because although they were at a table, their food was still on the trays and their own baby wasn't yet in the high chair. "You're at our table," Luna said, pushing Billy towards the high chair. "You can't be serious," the father said. He took one disbelieving look at Billy, then turned to Luna. "Deadly." Luna smiled. "Sorry, but I believe it's first come first served." The man gave a look to his wife, who began to put her baby into the high chair. "And anyway, it's a free country." "But it's not free for you to live." Luna glowered. "What?" the man asked, his eyes wide with disbelief. He obviously thought that Luna was some kind of weirdo. Luna simply looked into the man's eyes and he appeared to melt in a dark haze. When it cleared, his body was gone and Luna shook out her head. Clearly she wouldn't be feeding on the food at the court. The mother opened her mouth to scream, but she too was engulfed by the same haze and she disappeared. Billy desperately wanted to help, but she found her feet frozen to the floor as Luna rounded on the baby. It was such a small, helpless being that Billy was sure that if Luna had any compassion, she would show it then. The baby, however, only gurgled as it too disappeared into a dark haze. With her hands on her hips and feet frozen to the floor, Billy wasn't sure what she expected to accomplish, but she tried her hardest to leap over and choke the life out of Luna. Unfortunately, what she was reduced to was a little bob that looked almost like she was trying to dance. "Aren't you cute?" Luna sneered, turning her wand to the high chair. The plastic seat expanded outwards and began to recess further down so Billy wouldn't sit much higher than the other diners. The straps also became a lot thicker, whilst the feeding tray became bigger and stronger so it could support a lot more pressure. Luna didn't even pretend to put Billy into the chair. She simply orbed the young witch into and snapped the feeding tray sharply around Billy's arms, locking her hands out of the way below the tray. Calling one of the tormentors across, Luna ordered the demon to watch Billy whilst she took its place in the queue. Billy locked eyes with the green-hatted tormentor. "How's it going, Junior?" it teased. "Are you feeling better now that your Whittlebot is in a nice queen ID?" she mocked. "I mean, you have done a couple of big whoopses in your diapers since you went back into them." Billy stared ahead, stony-faced. The tormentor was not to be denied, however. Pulling the pacifier from Billy's lips, it held the pacifier by the ring. "Come on, you can tell me. You enjoy squeezing a big load into your diapers. It makes you feel all warm and mushy, doesn't it?" Billy took a deep breath. "Well, mushy in your diaper anyway." The tormentor chuckled. "I'll bet you even enjoy. I might be alone without the power of 3. But these shackles are coming off, I'm no baby." To call forth the wildcard power, to make them pay. Strike down these villains and save the day. Billy said, finishing casting the spell. The tormentor cocked its head at Billy as if it didn't quite understand. Now I know you're not that much of a stupid little baby to think that would work, so I guess you must really like screaming like a little baby. The demon smiled. Billy stared at the imp wide-eyed. You've got about 3 seconds to put this pacifier back in your mouth before you make everybody turn around and stare at you. Billy began wailing like a banshee. I meant from the moment I started explaining this. The tormentor laughed wickedly. It dangled the pacifier tantalizingly close to Billy's mouth, who for no other reason than to save her throat bit down on the pacifier to stop herself from crying. Ah, I love my little baby sister. The demon ridiculed. Luna then returned with the other 2 tormentors, who had big smiles on their faces. They had each brought a large plastic juice cup with a lid on, whilst Luna carried a tray with what looked like mints on it and a coffee. Setting down the tray in front of Billy, Luna looked at the imprisoned witch with a plastic smile on her face. Did somebody miss her mummy? Luna sneered. Bib, she commanded, and tied the extra large garment around Billy's neck. Looking down at the bib, Billy saw that it was pure white with a yellow border with "Mummy's Messmaker" in cartoony writing across the front. Billy gave a slight shake of her head as the pile of steaming mints was deposited onto the feeding tray of the high chair. Billy looked at mints before her and back to the demons. They clearly didn't expect her to drop her face into the muck and start eating, did they? Looking from each of the tormentors and then finally to Luna, Billy watched as they each brought out a fork. Stabbing a forkful, the demons raised them together and lunged for Billy's mouth. Billy kept her teeth clamped around the pacifier as the first of forks smeared against her mouth and none too gently stabbed at her face. Luna stopped and waited for the tormentors to tip the forks back into the mints for another go. Luna simply held out her hand. The pacifier appeared in her grasp. Smiling, she motioned to Billy, who found the bow on her head began to squeeze her crown. Opening her mouth to wince slightly, Billy found a forkful of the hot mints in her mouth. Luna then snapped Billy's mouth shut and gave her a warning point with the same finger. Swallowing, Billy found the mints to be an extremely hot and sweet chili. Not hot in temperature but as in spice. Again she found her head being squeezed, so Billy just took a deep breath and began to feed on what was being provided. Looking down, she saw that she was beginning to make an impression on the amount of chili sitting in front of her, but her mouth was burning and tears were now streaming down her eyes. She could feel her guts churning already and was pretty sure it wouldn't be long before the chili made its way onto the wrong side of her digestive tract. The forks then stopped coming and Billy found herself staring at an oversized sippy cup with the picture of a Disney princess on it. Without hesitation, she gladly began sucking down the thin milk she had been provided, in no doubt that it was probably laced with something, but Billy decided that at that moment it would be more beneficial to trade her pride for something to stop her mouth from burning. Slurping the last milliliters of liquid from the cup, Billy found herself back to being fed. This time the chili didn't seem so bad to start, but as the coating on the roof of her mouth dissipated, she was back to feeling the heat. Watching, Billy found that a couple of girls from her class were also in the mall. One was wearing a McDonald's uniform, the other a shop assistant's. At first they took a double take at Billy, who found herself missing mouthfuls of food and having them drop onto her bib as she tried to ignore the girls and continue to bite down the chili as quickly as it was being fed to her. Every glance Billy stole towards the girls, Billy found herself staring into their eyes. She tried to look away and concentrate on what she was being fed, but it was very difficult. Looking back at the pile of meat, Billy was surprised to find that she had finished the whole tray. Looking back at the girls, she saw them stand up giggling and begin to walk towards her position. Billy stared at Luna. There was no way she could convince the demon to hurry up and go. If she did, she would probably be made to endure pudding in this high chair as well, so Billy just looked around wondering what was next. When Luna pulled a bottle out of Billy's diaper bag, the young witch winced as the girls had surreptitiously walked all the way to the closest clean-up tray station just so they could get a better view of their classmate. They continued to walk towards Billy, who was trying to keep her head down when she found the bottle being forced into her mouth, with a little persuasion from her beau. Sucking on the bottle, Billy watched as her classmates approached. "Oh my goodness." One of the girls affected surprise. It took Billy a second to remember her name, Jean, Jenna, something like that. "Is that you, Billy?" the other girl, Alice, asked. "Yes, it is her." The tormentor in the black and white snarled. "Behave." Luna warned the demon. "I see you know Junior," she said to the first girl, Jenna. "We're in class together," Jenna stated. "Or at least we were. The way she's dressed, I doubt she'll be in class for quite a few years. Except maybe kindergarten." Alice laughed. "I'm surprised you say that." Luna said she hadn't released the pressure on the bottle, so Billy had to sit there effectively gagged by the bottle. "Why's that?" Jenna asked. "Oh, Junior's been in diapers all the time she's been in class. In fact, a few times she's come out needing, you know. I would have thought you all would have smelt her." Luna lied. "Really?" Alice asked. "Yes, we've already had a couple of whoopses today, haven't we, Junior?" Luna asked. Billy felt the bow on her head gain and lose weight rapidly, causing Billy to nod her head over enthusiastically. "She must be the one who wet herself down the diaper aisle," Jenna stated. Billy almost sighed. There was somebody who wouldn't be on the dean's list this year. It was more like the shoe section. The soccer tormentor stated. "Oh, okay." Alice shrugged. "Who are you guys?" "We're Junior's big sisters." The tormentors smiled. "And Junior's always like this?" Alice asked. Affecting Billy's new nickname. "Oh yes, well, except when she's at class. Then it's usually just a nice safe diaper until she can get home," Luna explained. "At classes she'll try and act nice and grown up, but once she gets home it's back into her true role in our family. Isn't that a little bit weird?" Jenna puzzled. "Not really, it was her choice." Luna lied again. Billy found that she had finished the bottle and Luna had pulled it away. Standing, Luna moved over to the high chair. Before she released Billy from it, she pulled out a spare towel from a pocket in the diaper bag. Using a baby wipe to clean around Billy's mouth, Luna removed the young witch's bib and placed the towel over her shoulder. Sliding the catch from underneath the high chair, Luna released Billy and quickly released Billy's hands from the harnesses as well, effectively setting Billy free. However, Billy once again found she was frozen solid. Unable to move, she had no choice but to allow Luna to levitate her up and pull Billy over her shoulder. Standing up, Luna forced Billy's legs around her waist, and with no effort at all, Luna supported Billy with one hand and rubbed her back with the other. Billy couldn't believe it, she was being burped in front of two of her classmates. What was even more surprising was the size of the burp she did let out after only a few seconds. Satisfied, Luna sat back down to speak to Billy's classmates. She replaced Billy's pacifier and dropped Billy down onto the floor in front of her whilst holding onto the reins attached to the back of Billy's harness. "Sorry," duty called. Luna smiled politely. Billy stared at her classmates with begging eyes, but they seemed oblivious, more like dumbstruck by her appearance, so they were of little help. "And this is Billy's idea?" Jenna asked. "Of course. Once we established that she pretty much was going back into diapers 24/7, Junior felt it was better if she simply accepted where babies come in life," Luna explained to Alice and Jenna. "Didn't we, Junior?" She cooed at Billy, moving her head down to Billy's level. Aren't you fussy just now?" Luna asked, puzzled. "Can you get her dolly, please?" Luna asked the tormentor with the green hat. As that tormentor went to get a dolly for Billy, the other two descended down to Billy's level. The young witch was in a very difficult position as she was sat on the floor in front of Luna and her classmates with the tormentors on either side of her. "They're great with her." Luna smiled at the two tormentors. "They must be a big help." Alice said wearily. So it's nothing medical? She said, inclining her head at Billy. Oh goodness no. Luna laughed. This is what Junior wanted, diapers and all. Don't worry, she's only a little embarrassed, but it was her choice. She said, directing everybody's gaze back down to Billy, who was trying to stop the tormentors from flicking ice down her diaper. The first tormentor returned with a soft ragtime doll for Billy and set it down in front of the witch. Oh my. Jenna gasped. Well, it's good to meet you. Alice smiled at Luna. And we'll see you in class, Junior. Actually, before you go, Luna began, this stopped both girls from standing. I don't suppose I could ask a favor. What is it? Jenna asked. Well, I'm a single parent and sometimes I need a bit of a break from my treasures. She said, ruffling the top of the nearest tormentor's head. I was wondering if you knew of anyone on campus who might be willing to babysit Junior and the girls. I'd do it. Alice smiled, arching her eyebrows. Really? Luna asked. Absolutely, I used to babysit in high school. I'm guessing the only difference with Junior is bigger diapers. And bigger messes, unfortunately. Luna laughed. But I'll pay good rates. She added. Sounds like a plan. Alice said before she gave out her cell phone number to Luna. I hope to see you soon, Junior. Yeah, see you on Monday, Junior. Jenna laughed as the two girls got up to walk away. Well, isn't that lucky? Luna asked Billy, who frowned through her pacifier. But I'm really sorry, girls, somebody needs a nap, so we will have to be going. She said to Billy's departing classmates. As soon as their backs were turned, Luna orbed Billy and the tormentors back to the mansion. Billy found herself dropped in her cot in the nursery whilst the tormentors appeared in the doorway. Luna herself remained behind in the mall for a few seconds. Spinning her wand around, Luna absorbed the souls of the entire population of the mall in single sweep. The bodies of the soulless began to fizz in a dark haze as Luna orbed herself back to the mansion. Billy stared at the tormentors in the doorway. They were wearily watching Billy, who found that not only was the crib's sides higher than she could climb out of, but they were very securely locked in place. Jumping against the walls of the crib, Billy hoped to use her momentum to push the crib over onto its sides so she could escape. It was at this point that Luna orbed into the nursery, and as the demon watched Billy jump against the sides of the crib and try to push it over, she smiled. Waving her wand at the crib, she changed it so that crib could now rock from side to side. And as Billy fell back onto the plastic mattress, the young witch's inertia set the crib swaying. Oh, rockabye. Luna laughed. She jutted her head towards Billy. I think we had better get Junior ready for a nap, don't you? She asked the tormentors. The demons nodded their heads. Good, you had better find her something to wear, after all we can't have a baby sleeping naked now, can we? Luna said, shooing the tormentors away. Luna then levitated the crib into the middle of the room so she could walk around Billy whilst she mocked her. Striding up to the bars of the crib, Luna watched as Billy sat down dejectedly in the middle of the bed. Crossing her legs, the young witch began to pout around the pacifier. Luna walked around to the side of the crib so she was staring into Billy's eyes. What's wrong, baby? Have you done another whoopsie? She mocked. Billy just put her head down and prayed for some respite from Luna. Luna, however, had other ideas. Using her demon strength coupled with her stolen levitating powers, Luna grabbed the side of the crib and spun it with all her might. Billy found herself pinned to the mattress of the crib as she was spun 360 degrees. The spin continued at the same speed as Luna kept the friction off of the bearing with her levitating powers. Soon Billy began to feel dizzy and disorientated. As Luna then began to increase the speed of the rotation of the crib, Billy's vision began to narrow and she began to black out. Feeling very weak, suddenly the rotation slowed and Billy found herself sliding along on her stomach as the centrifugal force kept her mostly supported to the crib's plastic mattress. However, once the crib reached the top of its arc, Billy found herself dropping away from the crib. Falling face first, Billy thought that at least she'd be out of the crib. Only to find herself slapping harshly against the plastic of the crib as it rotated to quickly catch the young witch before spinning her around again. Billy was spun and dropped 4 more times by the crib before Luna finally stopped it. Looking up at the demon, her face red, hair a mess and looking disheveled, Billy sneered at Luna. Standing up on jelly legs, she walked over to the edge of the crib where Luna was standing and attempted to kick out the demon. Luna didn't even look disinterested as she froze Billy's leg in place. Arching her eyebrow at the witch, Luna walked, motioned for Billy's other leg to lift and sent the young witch onto her back. From lying facing the lighting fixture, Billy found herself orbed over Luna's lap. Billy's upper torso was frozen solid, but the demon left her legs able to kick, even if Billy herself couldn't move. Pulling the young witch's skirt up and exposing her diaper, Luna affected disappointed. "You will not grow up to be a violent little girl," Luna said sadly. "I'm afraid there's only one thing I can do to straighten you out." She grinned wickedly as she removed Billy's pacifier and pulled down the witch's diaper. Billy just remained where she was, trembling. The demon had her completely at her mercy and with her strength could easily end her life. However, she was toying with her, and the more she did, the more helpless and alone Billy felt. She, of course, had no idea that Luna was amplifying these emotions, but there was still a small part of Billy that felt like this anyway. Luna absent-mindedly tapped her hand against Billy's exposed rump as she waited for her audience to return. Of course, like everything in life, the time of wait only served to increase Billy's emotions. She was nearly hysterical by the time the tormentors finally returned with a couple of hideous-footed sleepers. "Now girls, Junior here has been naughty," Luna patronized. Like many when speaking to children, Luna was using words that were more immature, as if Billy couldn't understand the concepts of good and bad yet. "It's not good to be naughty. This is what happens," Luna said as she brought her palm down against Billy's rear. Billy had thought that Luna might have built up to her strokes, but evidently she was wrong. The first slap left a stinging welt on her rump and brought tears to her eyes. Looking up at Luna, the demon simply gave a minute shrug. Then she brought her hand down a second time. Although this was done with the same force as the first, Billy still arched her neck, willing her body to move away from the pain but finding herself still frozen to the spot. The witch kicked her legs about to try and rid herself of the stinging sensation, but was only rewarded with a third and fourth smack that followed in quick succession. By the time Luna had brought her hand down a fifth time, the tears were flowing freely down Billy's cheeks. "Look, the little baby is crying," one of the tormentors mocked. "I bet she wishes she had her Parky now," another said as the sixth smack rained down on Billy. "She'll be bawling in no time and wishing for a soft spongy diaper." The last giggled when the seventh swat hit home. Billy bit her bottom lip to stop herself from crying out as Luna slapped her backside an eighth time. By the ninth she had drawn blood but hadn't cried out, much to the chagrin of the watching tormentors. The 10th and final stroke left Billy humiliated and sore. Luna turned Billy around as if she weighed nothing and pulled her diaper back over her bruised rump. Ripping off the red dress and bow Billy had been forced into, she held the young witch under the shoulders on her knee. "Have you learned your lesson?" Luna asked Billy. The young witch could see she wasn't beaten for the moment, so nodded her head. "Well, say thank you so I know there are no hard feelings," Luna pressed. "Thank you," Billy bit out. "That's good, that's how a nice young lady should ask. None of this bratty nonsense from you," Luna said, extending her arms out for a hug. "No," Billy said quietly. She had no intention of hugging the demon. Luna simply raised her hand to Billy's side and extended her palm. Her meaning was clear. Swallowing, Billy leaned into a hug. "Would one of you please get Junior another diaper?" Luna asked sweetly, releasing Billy. "Why, she hasn't filled that one yet." The tormentor in black and white giggled as she grabbed the puffy white garment. "Of course she hasn't, but I think somebody might need a bit of padding downstairs." Luna emphasized, drawing the overlarge diaper around Billy and patting her bottom. Now did you get some plastic panties? I don't want Junior to leak all over her sheets. Luna asked, lifting Billy by both shoulders and dangling the witch over her head. Do I? No, I don't. She mocked. Billy for a moment considered spitting in the face of the demon, but her sore rear quashed those urges. Here they are. The soccer tormentor rushed, handing Luna a pair of bright yellow plastic panties. The panties looked, to Billy anyway, remarkably plain. They were a dull yellow color and had elasticized cuffs and waist, but other than she could see no patterns or any other types of frills. Thank you. Luna smiled, drawing the panties up Billy's shapely legs and over the top of her padded rear. She set Billy down onto the floor and Billy winced as she touched the floor. Now what did you find for Junior to wear? We got this. It's special. The tormentor with the green hat smiled, holding up an oversized purple-footed sleeper. Billy at once understood why the plastic panties had been so minimalistic. This sleeper was beyond an eyesore. It was a riot of colors and angles and would drown Billy's shapely form, which Billy suspected was the point. Luna took hold of Billy's hands and removed the mittens she was wearing. Billy, however, was wary if the magic in them was truly gone after what happened in the mall with the pacifier, as even though she couldn't hit herself as hard as Luna could, Billy was afraid to try it just now. Even with her hands free, Billy was too timid to fight back just now and allowed her feet to be stepped into the sleeper. Even as it was drawn up her body, Billy could tell the sleeper was horrendous in so many ways. The feet attached were different in colors, her left blue and right red, which were then capped by an overhanging frill, this a lime green. The purple sleeper body then hung loosely around her knees until around her diaper, where it was drawn in tightly, accentuating her diaper bulge. The crotch also had buttons to allow for quick diaper changes, and each button was an off-putting brown color that was tied to the sleeper by thick orange thread. Billy shuddered as she felt the sleeper's zipper being drawn up her back. The sleeper was again very loose around Billy's chest and torso, make her figure completely neutral, and its garish purple was offset by thick black piping in vertical stripes. Billy's arms were gently forced down the sleeves, where the purple arms continued down to rust-red cuffs that were large and frilly but went to become very tight at her wrists. Around Billy's neck, the sleeper's collar, which extended out past her shoulders and down to her breastbone, was a putrid yellow but was so light that a slight movement would send it up to reveal its pink underside. Billy stared down at what she had been reduced to as the tormentors backed away to admire their handiwork. Aside from her large double diaper bulge, Billy's form was hidden behind frills and loud colors. She guessed that this wasn't exactly one of the garments that the sisters had either had stowed away in the attic or that one of the boys would have been forced into, but that was of little comfort. As Luna motioned for the other demons to put Billy into her crib, the young witch felt her stomach start to churn, signaling the onslaught of the chili she had been force-fed at the mall. Looking out of the bed as the rail was slid up in front of her face, Billy was about to protest when Luna used her wand to rock the crib, and Billy had no intention of being caught in another spin cycle. Lying down, Billy felt a sheet being drawn over her and frozen into place. Struggling briefly, Billy forced herself to relax as the demons left the room. Chapter 4. The texture of the footed sleeper bristled against her skin. It felt like her. It was animal fur, like a rat or mouse, which meant it felt uncomfortable rather than warm and encompassing. Rubbing her sleeves, Billy tried to ignore the pressure building on her insides. She didn't want to mess herself again. Struggling with the frozen sheet, Billy looked down at the trapped bulk of her diaper. At least her thick diaper was slightly more pleasant on her sore behind. She mused. Looking at her hands now free from the mittens, Billy wondered if she could actually use some of her magic. Unlike Paige, she couldn't just orb out of here or just blow them up like Piper. Even Phoebe could have levitated the sheet off of herself and then escaped out of the crib, but Billy was stuck. Pouting, Billy was spurned into action as her stomach rumbled. Shaking off her torpor, Billy summoned a small lightning spell. Her fingers fizzed momentarily before the spell failed to ignite in its radiance. Billy chewed her lip as she wondered what had gone wrong. Trying again, Billy pulsed more power into the spell and was rewarded as the electricity discharged from her hand. The spell began to fly from the young witch, lighting the room in an electric blue flash. However, the spell didn't arc away from her body as planned. Billy watched as the back of the bolt appeared to catch the front just above Billy's head. The spell then burst in a shower of golden dust that fell on Billy's head. Trying to shield her face with her hands, Billy found herself inhaling some of the dust. It began to stick to her eyebrows and lashes, and Billy began to feel really weak. Shaking her head to try and wake herself up, Billy raised her arms in an effort to try and keep herself awake. It was to no avail though, as Billy felt her eyelids grow heavier as she watched as the golden yellow dust settled on her body. Billy already felt like she was in dreamland. Luna orbed into the nursery as soon as she could feel Billy drifting off. Pointing the wand at the young witch, Luna watched as Billy's image began to appear in the confines of her crystal wand. Unlike the charmed ones, however, Billy's body didn't disappear. Instead, Luna moved her hands over the wand and placed them above the crystal. Dangling her fingers as if she was controlling a puppet, a world began to form around Billy's image. At first there was darkness. Then a blinding white light caused Billy to shield her eyes. "I'm not in Kansas anymore," Billy thought dryly. As the light began to subside and shift, Billy found herself standing on wooden plank above the ocean. For as far as she could see, the plank stretched out in front and behind her. It didn't appear to be supported by anything and was no wider than Billy's shoulders. Rubbing her hands to her biceps, Billy felt the uncomfortable sleeper was gone. Staring down at her appearance, Billy found that she was wearing a ripped linen shirt that had long sleeves that fell about her fingers. Lifting up the shirt, Billy found that her diapers were gone. Well, almost. They had been replaced by bright and colorful Little Mermaid Little Swimmer. Dropping the shirt down back over the swim diaper, Billy brought her hands up to her head. Her hair felt stringy and unwashed, her skin grimy and unclean, and her bare feet felt like they had been caked in mud. The plank began to shake as Billy heard mutterings coming from behind her. Looking over her shoulder, Billy saw tormentors in their black oily form approaching her. Not wanting to find out why, Billy took a couple of steps away. The plank began to shake more violently as Billy stepped, and the young witch had to carefully tread to avoid bumping herself into the water. Billy wasn't sure why, but she felt that falling into the water would be a very bad idea. Sneaking a glance down into the crystal waters, Billy's fears were confirmed when she saw other tormentors circling beneath her. They had fish-like fins and large flippered feet, but the imps still retained their humanoid forms. Beginning to increase her pace, Billy began to move quickly along the plank. Billy found she was reduced to waddling as she tried to escape her pursuers. Her swim diaper was designed to be latex tight against her skin, causing it to bunch between Billy's legs as she tried to move quickly. Coupled to the fact that the faster Billy tried to move along the plank, the more the wooden beam began to oscillate. Stealing a quick glance behind her, Billy saw the tormentors gaining on her. Ignoring the wobbling plank and the uncomfortable garment around her waist, Billy attempted to pick up the pace, causing the demons to whoop in delight. Rushing along the plank, her legs feeling like jello, Billy's glance kept drifting behind her. For a second it appeared that the tormentors had dropped back, staring at the demons for a second too long. Billy found her foot missing the beam. It wasn't so much that the witch had missed the beam, in fact her foot slipped straight through the solid wood as if it wasn't there. Throwing her arms forward, Billy could only scrabble hold of a solid piece of the beam with her nails. Feeling the wood jar against her hands, leaving splinters embedded deep in her fingertips, Billy clung to the beam. The wood began to bend down towards the ocean, and the tormentors swimming beneath Billy began to hum with activity. Staring down, Billy watched as the demons began to circle like sharks, setting themselves for a feeding frenzy. As the first demon leaped from the water, aiming itself at Billy, the young witch swung her legs up and wrapped them around the solid beam. The tormentor missed by inches. Billy was sure she could actually feel its breath the backs of her legs. With no time to react, a second tormentor jumped at Billy's hanging form. There was no way for the young witch to avoid the demon, and Billy tensed her body, biting her fingers deep into the plank. Unfortunately for Billy, even though she couldn't avoid the tormentor, she still had to watch as the demon flew through the air towards her hanging diaper. Tensing her body, Billy felt the tormentor hit her. Rather than the demon striking at Billy with mass, however, the demon seeped through her body. Billy shuddered as her stomach clenched and her gag reflex kicked in. She felt like she was going to be sick and soil herself whilst choking all at the same time. Managing to gain control on her convulsing insides, Billy prevented herself from doing any of those things as she tried to swing herself around and back up onto the skyward side of the beam. Pulling her leg over the beam, Billy began to slide her body around. Whilst her vision was obscured by the wooden plank, a third tormentor flew at Billy. Billy felt her insides clench again, but as she was in the middle of trying to pull herself around, Billy wasn't as quick to reassert her control over her tensing body, and she felt herself wetting her diaper slightly. Hiccuping as well, Billy shook her head and gritted her teeth. Staring down at the swirling tormentors, Billy sneered at the demons. Looking back at the demons who had been following her on the beam, Billy saw them resume the chase. Muttering under her breath, Billy turned and began to run again. Try as she might, Billy found that she was unable to keep herself far ahead of the chasing pack of tormentors. Despite sprinting so hard that she felt that the beams wobbling would throw her up and into the cool blue waters beneath her, Billy couldn't outpace the demons. It was then that she caught sight of the island. Redoubling her efforts, Billy increased her already lung-bursting pace. Her balance was tested by the beam's vibration, and she could feel her legs wanting to buckle under her own weight. Ignoring all this, Billy just sucked down burning lungfuls of air and tried to make it to the island. The tormentors behind her kept narrowing the gap between themselves and the witch, and within several steps were close enough to be able to slash at Billy's flailing shirt. As their claws tore out at the garment, Billy could feel her stomach convulse with each slash. As the tail of her shirt was torn into strips, actively revealing her swim diaper, Billy felt herself releasing a little bit of urine into her diaper. Acting as a spur, this forced Billy to run at an unimaginable speed. As the island got closer, Billy watched as figures on the sandy shore became clearer. If she hadn't been so busy pumping her arms and legs, Billy would have stopped in shock. It was the Charmed Ones. Rushing to the island, Billy saw the sisters beckoning to her. She sprinted on, ignoring her tumbling stomach and weakening knees. Grimacing as she was forced to wet her swim diaper again slightly, Billy forced herself onwards and away from the chasing pack of tormentors. Watching the sisters ahead of her, Billy noticed that they were chanting a spell. Billy watched as a framework appeared around the island. The frame seemed to shimmer with silver light as if there were very fine sheets hanging from it. However, there was one gap directly in front of Billy, and she charged towards that. With 2 paces to go until she was inside the frame, Billy snuck a look backwards and saw the tormentors only a pace behind her. Turning to look forward again, Bill found herself staring directly into Paige's eyes. Billy nodded slightly as she tried to run past her friend. Only Billy found herself stopped. She had run straight into Paige's outstretched hand, which was currently against Billy's diaper. Billy shuddered as her mentor witch squeezed the little swimmer. "Let me past." Billy shrieked hurriedly. "Oh, I'm sorry." Paige shrugged. "Only clean girls get to stay safe." And with that, she pushed Billy so hard that she spun the young witch back to face the tormentors who were just about on top of her. Billy turned back to the frame but found the gap was gone. Turning back to the tormentors, Billy tried to summon a spell. However, she was too late and the demons piled towards her, diving through her body, causing her to convulse. Billy felt her stomach cramp painfully as she began to black out. Billy awoke to a near-crippling stomach cramps. As the cramps eased, they were replaced by a foul stench. Not daring to open her eyes, Billy was only too aware as to what had just happened. Worse than that, with the sheet being frozen in place, Billy literally had lie and feel the mess being spread up and down her skin. Forcing away the wallowing self-pity she felt, Billy managed to wiggle one of her arms free. Conjuring a tiny lightning spell that sat on the edge of her finger, Billy burnt through the sheet that was holding her in place. Peeling herself away from the plastic sheet, Billy sat up on her knees with her diaper sagging beneath her. She regarded her surroundings. Effectively, she was trapped by the crib, and although she could cast some spells, it appeared that anything too powerful would result in that yellow sleep dust being released again. Billy touched her hand gently to her rear of her sleeper. And she didn't want that to happen again. Moving gingerly to the bars of the crib, Billy felt the bed shift with her weight. Hanging onto the bars, Billy felt along them looking for the latch. Finding it just at her fingertips, Billy gently tried to work it loose. Finding it stuck, Billy zapped a lightning spell at the latch. As the bars of the crib descended, Billy began to feel really woozy as the sleep dust blew past her face. Shaking it off, Billy tried to stand and walk to the door. Finding her knees weak, Billy resigned herself to crawling until the dust wore off. Pulling open the door to the nursery, Billy very carefully snuck out onto the landing. Looking up to the next floor for the attic, Billy caught sight of the soccer-shirted tormentor sitting on the stairs waiting for Billy. Billy briefly considered using the element of surprise and her magic to blow the imp away and charge up to the Book of Shadows. However, the more than likely din of a magical battle would alert Luna, and Billy didn't want that. Looking instead to the front door, Billy's musing were cut short as the tormentor in the black and white began to move up the stairs towards Billy. Sliding back along the wall, Billy eased herself from the nursery doorframe to the next room along Piper's. Obviously, as the boy's mother, she would want to be near the nursery in case anything was to go wrong, so Billy decided against hiding in this room because of two reasons. The first was that this was the most likely for Luna to be in, and more importantly, there was a significantly lower chance of this room containing any potions with which Billy could use against the demons. Moving instead to the last room on the same side of the stairs, Billy snuck quickly into Phoebe's room before the tormentor reached eye level with the landing. Carefully and quietly closing the door, Billy turned and faced the room. She nearly yelped when she saw the napping form of the green-hatted tormentor. It was lying up in bed with the hat pulled low of its face, and its chest was rhythmically rising and falling. Billy shuddered slightly, and if she had indeed needed diapers, Billy thought dryly, she would probably have wet them a little. As her thoughts once again turned to her diapers, Billy rubbed her hand against the soiled undergarment sagging around her waist, and she was filled with disgust and revile. Staring around the room, Billy saw that on the dresser halfway between herself and the tormentor there were some potions. Of course, Billy didn't know exactly what was in them, but Phoebe was usually smart enough to label them with their constituent parts, so Billy would at least know if they would be effective against the demons or not. Billy eased forward. She hadn't tried standing up when she entered the room, and she was afraid to now. Pushing herself out quietly on her belly, Billy felt for any loose or creaking floorboards as she gingerly pulled herself towards the dresser. Upon reaching the old-fashioned wooden vanity, Billy rose up onto her knees and reached for the first potion. As Billy made to grab at the small glass vial, a green blur whizzed past the tips of her fingers, actually shaving off a portion of one her elongated fingernails. The blur then arced back away from Billy, who trained her eyes on it as it slammed into the doorframe, effectively sealing the door shut. As it spun to rest, Billy saw that it was the green hat from the tormentor. Turning to face the demon, Billy's hands felt for a potion vial but found them all shattered by the spinning hat. "I think you're a little young for makeup." The tormentor smiled as another green hat appeared on her head. "But it's a good job you're here, because I can smell that one of us is in a dirty diaper." The demon mocked, moving her hands to the bedspread. "What do you think, Mr. Hoppy?" the imp asked a rabbit's soft toy. "Go get the dirty diaper." The tormentor stressed, hurling the soft toy at Billy. As Billy ducked out of the way of the speeding soft toy, she found herself being pounced upon by the tormentor. As the toy hit the wall, the impact dropped two pictures from the wall and left a sizable hole in the wall behind. Using its demon strength, the tormentor quickly overpowered Billy and held the young witch's hands behind her back. Frog marching the Billy to the door, the tormentor savagely yanked Billy's hands backwards, causing her land on her full diapers, spreading the mess further. Touching the green hat that was embedded in the doorframe, the tormentor cooed at Billy smugly as the green garment vanished in an oily haze. Pulling Billy roughly to her feet, the imp casually walked Billy back into the nursery. Thrusting Billy into the nursery, the tormentor roughly pushed the young witch up onto the changing table. Flipping Billy onto her back and causing the mess in her diapers to move more, the demon drew a strap over Billy's chest and tightened it, holding her in place. Although Billy could have fought the demon, she decided to lay low and at least have the dignity of a clean diaper before she would try and make her escape. As the tormentor stood over Billy, it began to grow, and although its clothes stayed in the same style as it was already wearing, they became as decidedly more mature cut as the demon aged to slightly older than Billy before it reached for the first snap on Billy's crotch. At first Billy thought that the tormentor was being quick and efficient as the demon unsnapped her sleeper. However, Billy realized that she had been lulled into a false sense of security. As the tormentor removed the tapes of Billy's diaper, it tutted disapprovingly. Looking up into Billy's eyes, it shook its head and carefully refastened the tapes of Billy's diaper. Releasing the chest strap around Billy, the tormentor picked up the young witch and stood her up on the changing table. Spinning Billy around, the tormentor unzipped Billy's sleeper and pulled it off of her. Stepping out of the garment, Billy was naked save for her drooping plastic pants which masked her sagging diaper. The young witch folded her arms across her chest to try and retain a little modesty. "Sorry, Junior, but you're going to need more than baby wipes to clean up your whoopsie," the tormentor said in mature voice. Billy then found herself lifted off of her feet by the tormentor. Hoisting Billy over its shoulder, the demon placed its hand firmly on Billy's rear, further moving the mess in her diapers around. Billy wanted to try and fight the tormentor off, but without help there was no way for her to remove her own diapers, and the last thing she wanted was to end up with diaper rash because of these evil demons. Billy tried to remain motionless as she was carried through the mansion to the bathroom. As the tormentor opened the door and it stood Billy in the bathtub and moved back slightly with a warning point of its finger. "Now Junior, we need to get all the whoopsie off of your bot before we can put you in nice clean diapers, okay?" the tormentor mocked. "Now you just stand still and let the big girls clean you right off." The demon laughed as it unpopped Billy's plastic pants. Discarding the yellow garment, the tormentor began to untape Billy's diaper. Due to all the moving around that had befallen Billy, some of the mess had leaked out from the innermost diaper and into the second. As Billy watched, the tormentor fussed around with the diaper, making sure none of it fell onto the enamel bathtub that the demon had placed the young witch in. Equally as carefully, the tormentor then slowly removed the inner diaper and it casually discarded both into the boy's diaper pail that was sitting by the toilet. Turning on the shower, the tormentor hummed softly to Billy as it took a facecloth that was sitting on top of the bathtub and it began to clean Billy's most sensitive of areas. Billy was inert in shame as the demon rubbed her bottom clean. She knew that deep down this was her chance to escape, but instead she found herself staring at her reflection in the mirror. From the waist up she was as she would like to be, an adult, naked, but Billy looked like an adult. From beneath her waist, however, Billy had somebody cleaning her mess from her bottom. She would have pouted, but that would have affected the tiniest piece of dignity that she was striving to maintain. "All done," the tormentor announced happily. Turning away from Billy to grab a towel, the demon had left itself open for an attack. Readying herself against the wall so she wouldn't slip at the wrong moment, Billy braced herself. Taking a breath, Billy pushed herself forwards to land on top of the tormentor. Holding her arms out in front of her ready to wrestle the demon to the ground, Billy was surprised by both the tormentor's speed and actions. Rather than readying itself for a counterattack, the tormentor pulled off its hat and held it in front of itself. Billy watched with horror as all she could see was the darkened insides of the garment, and as she moved towards the hat rather than pushing against it, Billy fell inside the hat. She then found herself dumped face first onto the cold plastic mat of the downstairs playpen. Completely naked and dripping wet from her waist down, Billy placed her hand over her body to try and retain some modesty. The playpen looked out onto the big double bay windows, and the busy street outside could easily see the shamed young witch. Moving to the back of the playpen and crouching down, Billy hoped she would cast a small enough figure to be mistaken for the boys by the speeding traffic flying past the windows. Billy then felt the toe of a high heel tapping against her bare behind. Looking up but not spinning around, Billy saw Luna and the tormentors standing behind her. The tormentors were all back in their little girl forms, but this still didn't stop the sense of foreboding that the young witch got from seeing them all standing over her. Changing mat. Luna commanded, and Billy found herself orbed onto a changing mat in the middle of the living room. Finding herself frozen, Billy was pushed onto her back by Luna as the tormentors moved out of her field of vision. Billy could feel baby wipes moving over her, drying the water as the tormentors returned with a new outfit for Billy to wear. Wordlessly, Billy's backside was raised up and deposited onto diapers. As the tapes were drawn around her, Billy found herself being raised up once more. This process was repeated until Billy had 6 diapers taped around her midsection. Finding herself unfrozen, Billy tried to squeeze her legs together. Finding herself unable to, the young witch sat up and stared at her captors. They were all admiring their handiwork. Corner. Luna commanded. Billy found her nose in the corner of the living room. Her massive rear was now firmly on display to all those traveling past, and as it was now getting dark, the lights from the house would only attract the attention of the passerbys. Now a little bird told me that 2 of my girls might have been fighting. But I know it wasn't you, Junior, because you already learned your lesson about being a naughty girl, didn't you? Billy nodded her head, not trusting herself to speak. She could feel Luna behind her now, and that sense of dread returned. Billy shivered as the demon slid her fingers under the waistband of her diapers and gave her rear a tap. No, it certainly wasn't you. Luna smiled, her mouth inches from Billy's ear. But just in case it was, you can stand here and think about what you did whilst the big girls get your stuff ready for tonight. What's happening tonight? Billy asked shakily. Oh, because I haven't got a babysitter, you'll have to come with me to P3. Luna laughed. Now don't move. She stressed, leaving Billy alone. It must have been only minutes that Luna and the tormentors left Billy alone for, but it seemed like hours. Billy could hear crashing, banging and giggling coming from the tormentors as they piled what they needed together. Billy then found herself being swept up in the din of noise. Her hair was pulled back and plaited, a pale blue tweenies shirt was roughly pulled on her, and her feet were covered by a pair of frilly white socks and a pair of white Velcro trainers. Before she could react, Billy found herself staring at a bulging diaper bag and the large bag for the boys' travel cot. Gulping, Billy turned and saw Luna stalking towards her, left arm behind her back. Summoning her wand, Luna gave Billy a toothed grin which made young witch feel very uneasy. Spinning the wand at Billy, Luna began. When the music starts playing and the beat is pumping, you have to dance like a child that's all running and bumping. I'll pin this on you with the power of 3. When in these pants, you're my dancing baby. Billy looked down as a red and black diaper cover squeezed itself over the gargantuan mass of diapers around Billy's waist. The plastic pants were a full-cut pair of rumba panties, and 6 lines of frills flagged the massive padding between Billy's legs. Pulling the TV remote from behind the couch, the tormentor in the soccer shirt flicked the TV onto pop music station, and as Billy was subjected to an overtoned Madonna studio-aided to sound cool, the young witch found herself dancing like a loon. There was no chance of a mature slow step with a beat that fast. Billy was instead waving, bopping, and weaving unsteadily on waddling steps whilst the music played. Finding herself being oogled by the tormentors, Billy tried to at least turn around and dance away from the demons, but she found that her couple of faltering steps to spin her body away from the imps caused her to instead spin fully around with her arms wide open for dramatic effect. Aren't you the little ballerina? The tormentor in the black and white teased. Luna switched off the TV and turned to the imps. Now you 3 behave whilst Junior and I are out. She warned the tormentors. Now, sweetness, we had better go. We've got a lot to sort out to make sure you're ready for when the crowds arrive. She said, pointing the wand at the pile on the floor. Before pointing the wand at Billy, Luna stopped and looked at the young witch. I might loose you in the crowd, and I wouldn't want anybody to mess with you or your diapers whilst we're out. She nodded sagely. Spinning the wand at Billy's rumba panties, Luna added a strong-looking heart-shaped lock around their waist. The lock came complete with the phrase, "Property of Mummy," etched into the lock. Luna then aimed her wand, and Billy and the 2 orbed out of the room. Phoebe turned, floated to Piper. The 2 sisters took each other's hand. At the mention of P3, both became very worried for Billy. The staff at the club knew Billy, and if Piper wasn't there they would probably not know what to make of the development of this demon turning up with Billy diapered and in tow. Piper's motherly instincts came to the fore, and all she could think of was how terrible for Billy it would be. Phoebe, however, was being more practical. All she could think of was where Luna was going to put Billy, because there was a possibility that the young witch would have access to some potions or weapons in the club. Maybe if Billy ends up in your office, then she could use the potions in your safe. Phoebe mused. I don't keep potions in the safe. Piper said defensively. Of course you don't. Phoebe smiled. I never thought I see your rumba panties again. Piper shuddered. I wish we never had them to start with. Phoebe said. And I can bet Billy will never want to see them again once she vanquishes this demon. The quicker we can get out of here the better. Piper finished. Then we can help make sure that Billy never has to suffer this ever again. Billy found herself orbed into an oversized car seat. The seat was wider and taller than a normal car seat, however it was of the same style as the one that Piper used for the boys. It was also a lot deeper, and Billy was sunk into the seat so it encompassed her, making her feel very small. Beside her in the driver's seat of Piper's car, Luna was using Piper's voice to make arrangements at P3. As she casually told the staff that Piper was sick and she was taking care of business, the demon turned to Billy and popped a pacifier into the young witch's mouth. Even though Billy was secured by a 5-point harness and her arms were wedged in tight beside her body, the young witch tried to think of some way she could stop Luna from driving her to P3. With her only real choice being able to make Luna crash the car, Billy attempted to kick the stick into neutral but only succeeded in having the chair pushed backwards slightly to take her out of harm's way. Sighing, Billy felt like giving up and accepting her fate, but a gurgle from her stomach reminded her of just how far down Luna had forced her to sink, which increased Billy's resolve tenfold. Luna, who had obviously heard Billy's stomach, gave the young witch's knee a pat. Trying to clear some more room in there, are you? She laughed. Well, don't worry, you're wearing enough diapers to last you the night. Even for a big messer like you. I'll just ask the staff for help. Billy gurgled defiantly around the pacifier. Sure, and how exactly will you explain all this? Luna motioned to Billy. I know what you goody-goodies are like. No, you won't ask for help because otherwise you'll have to explain that I'm a demon and you're a witch. And I know the charmed ones wouldn't approve. Billy didn't know what to say. Luna was right, and they both knew it. Looking back out the front window, Billy began to watch the streets roll by. Don't get downhearted though, Junior. Luna smiled in mock sympathy. I know something that will cheer you up. She nodded. Billy then felt immense pressure on bladder. She couldn't hold it and she wet her diaper in a sudden burst. The urine pooled and began to be absorbed, but as Billy was in a reclined position, the liquid not immediately absorbed flowed to the back of Billy's diaper before pooling there and finally disappearing as the diaper did its job. Doesn't that make you feel all warm and fuzzy? Luna laughed. Billy shut her eyes, bit back tears, and tried to ignore her situation. All too soon the car pulled up outside the back of P3. Luna left Billy secured in the car as she removed everything from the boot of the car in a single trip. Returning finally to Billy, the demon orbed the young witch out onto the damp floor of the alleyway. Harness, Luna commanded, and Billy found herself strapped tightly to Luna. Now it's time to go inside and get you set up, Luna said, dragging Billy inside by the reins. Billy tried to avoid eye contact as she walked inside. Most of the staff of P3, many who Billy knew by name, would be there tonight. Billy hoped that the unpleasant storm that was brewing would keep the crowds away tonight, as it usually did on the less busy Friday nights. Coupled to the fact that Piper hadn't booked a band to play meant that hopefully Billy would be spared some embarrassment. Her huge waddling behind, however, seemed to imply otherwise, though. Being led directly up to the bar, Billy tried to keep her eyes on the countertop as Luna showed her off to the staff. Now I'm the babysitter that Piper usually uses for the boys. However, tonight I have another charge. This little one is having some control issues, and as such I have taken that responsibility from her. Luna explained loudly. Billy chanced a look around the club and saw everybody staring at her. And her huge diapers. However, Piper is sick tonight and as such I have to be here as well. Don't worry, I'm not a pro, so I'm not going to be making many changes to the plans for this evening. All I can ask is that everybody keeps an eye out for any accidents and lets me know. Luna said, squeezing Billy's diapers as she said this. Apart from all that, everybody should be okay. And it'll be bedtime soon anyway. Luna laughed. Billy looked up to the bar. She saw one of the shaggy barmen. He was in his early 20s and had the obligatory scraggy beard and unkempt hair that made him look cool, stare at Billy. His questioning gaze was piercing and Billy tried to just express a single word, help, to him through her eyes. Looking back into us, all Billy could see was pity. And that wasn't helpful. The young witch then found herself being pulled by the reins back towards Piper's office. Luna had clearly set up all she thought she would require in the office. In the center of the room, which usually doubled as the place that the bar staff could chill in when the club calmed down, the travel cot was set up. It looked to Billy that it hadn't been changed that much, as it was only slightly longer and not any taller than when the sisters had set it up in the office before. The soundproofing on the office made it the perfect place for Billy to be left. Of course, Billy knew that just because something looked unchanged, it was more than likely that Luna had booby-trapped it in some way. Rounding on Billy, the jailer of souls grabbed her by the wrist and forced Billy to look into her eyes. Listen, you, I have all the knowledge from the charmed ones at my disposal as well as their powers. You might think that you can use the confusion from tonight as some way to escape, but I can just simply call you to me with the Lost Witch spell, so know that there is no chance of your escape. Got it? Luna warned sternly. Billy nodded her head. She knew it was futile to argue with Luna whilst she had her harness to her, and it would be foolish to do so anyway. As the lights went down and Billy watched as the first few patrons began to enter the bar, the young witch tried to mentally prepare herself. Once thrust out into the club's main room, she would be dancing like an idiot whilst wearing wet diapers. She couldn't come out this with her head held high, but she had enough pride to know that if she paid attention, then she would eventually discover the secret to defeating Luna and rescuing her friends. And then she was out in the main room. The harness orbed from her in single moment as Billy turned back to look at Luna. Feeling a shiver run down her spine, Billy moved to the far end of the room to squeeze herself into a booth. Sitting higher due to her packed behind, Billy watched as the DJ fretted with his equipment trying to get the music going. Billy people watched as the club began to fill up. Whilst there was no music, Billy was completely safe. Her thoughts had been right, though the nasty weather had kept many people away, and within 5 minutes there were no more people walking through the door. Feeling the eyes of the bored bar staff upon her, Billy realized that the music was about to start. Trying to wrap her legs tightly around the center column of the booth's table, Billy prayed for the something to break down. Of course, that would never happen. Piper herself had designed the music station with the help of the DJ, so there were plenty of backups, and after a few minutes of fumbling with his head out of sight, the DJ reappeared and started spinning his wheels of steel. Billy clamped her hands around the edge of the table and tried to keep her legs tight around the column. At first it appeared to be working, as even though her head was bobbing along with the music, at least she wasn't running around like a crazy person. However, as the songs wore on, Billy found her legs loosening and her fingers tapping. A little voice inside her head kept repeating over and over, "Got to dance." Without really being aware of doing it, Billy stood up and began to bob in time with the Sugar Babes. It wasn't the usual bump and grind of the club either, it was the bobbing and spinning of a 2-year-old. Pretty soon Billy got dizzy and just ended up bobbing on the spot or having her head loll from side to side. Even though P3 was a lot emptier than it usually was, Billy could see plenty of regulars and people she knew moving around her in a big circle. She was a public spectacle, and her only saving grace at the moment was that her wet diapers were hidden by the massive bulk between her legs. The bulk also removed any of Billy's natural grace that she would have retained whilst dancing, and as the circle started becoming tighter and tighter around Billy, her dancing became worse and worse. She then felt a hand on her diapers as one of the braver elements of the crowd gave her diaper a swat. Billy then spun away from the guy's hands as she felt the mood of the people in the club change. A greasy-looking guy with olive skin advanced on Billy, taking her hands. He began to wiggle with Billy, who copied him with less than graceful movements. Licking her up and down like a piece of meat, the guy gave Billy a toothy grin. It was then his eyes stopped on the lock around Billy's plastic pants. It was at this Billy had to smile. The guy's eyes practically bulged in his skull. "Holy crap," the guy mouthed before dropping Billy's hands and retreating to the edge of the circle with his friends. Billy stopped smiling as she saw the information whip around both sides of the ring of people. It was then she could sense the mood of the circle turning. From a girl dressed in a silly costume to somebody who was locked into diapers, the wave of confusion, and with that anger, began to rise. Billy tried to force herself out of the circle, but as the music was still playing she was still dancing, and it was almost as if she was tied to the middle of the circle. Billy felt like every time she tried to move to the edge of the circle her body was pulled back into the middle to continue dancing. "We have to stop this," Paige stressed to her sisters. "We have to do something. We must be able to." "With what?" "We don't have our powers or the power of 3. Phoebe sighed. "Well, I'm not being defeated by some crystal," Piper announced. "There must be somebody here who knows what's happening." Billy felt like a prized animal. The circle's mood had changed again as the alcohol had started flowing. At least the bar staff had taken some pity on her and been prompt in serving drinks. The shaggy barman who Billy had pleaded to help her had even taken to coming out with drinks in hand, partly due to the fact that the bar wasn't busy and he was searching for a tip, but also because of the curiosity of seeing Billy in her current state. She guessed that he was trying to keep the mood of the crowd mellow as well, which was good for him and for the moment. Billy, however, gauging when to stop with the drink service could end up leaving Billy in a precarious position. As the night progressed and Billy became more and more tired with the constant dancing, she found herself looking longing across to the booths and tables. Even the bar from which she was attracting so much attention would offer her aching feet some respite. What was worse was that once again her bowels were begging to ask for relief. Billy was sure that Luna would not take her into the office until she soiled herself, but Billy did not want the indignity of doing so, as when she defeated the demon she would want to return to P3 with as much dignity as she could muster intact. As the night progressed and Billy became more and more tired with the constant dancing, she found herself looking longing across to the booths and tables. Even the bar from which she was attracting so much attention would offer her aching feet some respite. What was worse was that once again her bowels were begging to ask for relief. Billy was sure that Luna would not take her into the office until she soiled herself, but Billy did not want the indignity of doing so, as when she defeated the demon she would want to return to P3 with as much dignity as she could muster intact. Something deep inside Billy snapped. From deep inside the recesses of her mind that had been drowned out by the confusion and fear, a plan formulated. It was so complete but simple and uncomplicated at the same time. With no help, Billy could at least accomplish some of her goals. All that the young witch required was the courage to use a power that she had promised the sisters she wouldn't unless it was a dire emergency. And as Billy felt her stomach lurch and her sore knees ache, she decided that this was the emergency that she required. Billy allowed herself to relax. She had unfortunately found that she could now mess herself quite easily, and even if that wasn't a great skill, at least when she did it herself, Billy could pretend it was a choice she made rather than a pitfall act as the tormentors and Luna wanted it to be. At the final moment of her disgust, Billy let her emotions fill her. Feeling the magic within her build, she dug deep into her reserve of power and allowed her senses to permeate through into the minds of the crowd. Feeding her projection power, Billy took the crowd's collective mind and, to put it simply, changed it. She simply told the crowd she hadn't pooped herself. And with all that power in her projection, they all believed it. Weak or strong-willed, the power the young witch poured into the projection and the simplicity of it made it easy for the crowd to accept it. Luna, however, wasn't within the tight radius of the crowd and was therefore unaffected by Billy's projection. She was however more than aware of the sense of embarrassment and shame that the young witch felt on having messed herself and continuing to dance relentlessly. Smiling, the demon strode over to the crowd, who were either too intoxicated to care or simply unaware of the situation, had not reacted with the shock and awe expected. Deciding to give them a little show, Luna lifted Billy up onto her shoulder and placed a hand under the young witch's diapers. Giving the sagging garments a squeeze, Luna affected surprise. The crowd laughed with her but without sympathy for Billy as the demon walked into the back office with Billy frozen in place on her shoulder. Once inside the back office, Billy was sat on Piper's desk. As the uncomfortable mess was forced around her diapers, Billy stared around the back office. As expected, there were a couple of security guards and a couple of members of the bar staff having a quick break whilst the club was not busy. They all stared back at Billy, and the smell she had brought with her, not wanting to look but unable to turn away. Luna, however, was delighted with such an intimate audience and so wasted no time in unlocking Billy's dancing pants and laying the young witch face down and frozen on the desk. As the warm mess began to ooze down from the rear of her diaper, Billy watched as Luna took out Billy's diaper bag. Slapping out a large handful of thick multicolored diapers, Luna took out the changing mat and spread it on the floor. Billy found the lower portions of her body frozen, but other than that she was free to wiggle. Looking around as the staff members strode around agape, Billy saw that this might be her chance to escape. Reaching for the phone cord on the floor, Billy hooked her hand around it and pulled the fax machine down hard. The large white box froze in midair just above Luna's head, who wordlessly pulled out another handful of thick diapers and gave Billy a warning look. The young witch didn't know what she was more shocked by, the fact that she failed to get Luna or the fact that the demon had used her powers in front of mortals. Leaving Billy stuck as she was, Luna stood up and calmly placed the fax back on the desk. The bar staff looked shocked, but Billy could see that they were all frozen in place as the demon took up her wand and drained them of their souls. "I guess soundproofing works both ways." Luna laughed. "And now that I don't have a crowd to please." She gestured at Billy with her wand, and tormentors, in their dark oily form, shoot out from it. Grasping the young witch in their claws, they grabbed the baby wipes and diapering supplies and roughly cleaned and powdered Billy. Luna then swept her wand over the pile of diapers. "Diapers," the demon commanded, and Billy found her legs forced apart as the diapers orbed around her one at a time. By the time the pile was cleared, Billy could barely move because of the bulk around her waist. With her legs forced so far apart, Billy found sitting up difficult, and even as Luna unfroze her legs, Billy knew that moving would be next to impossible. "Shirt," Luna sighed. The tweenie's shirt appeared in her fingers. "Sleeper," Luna smiled as Billy found herself once again the garish garment. This time, however, the bulk around her midsection caused the sleeper to strain. Billy could feel the extra slack designed to hide her features being drawn down to try and encompass the disabling bulk around her waist. "Travel cot," Luna pointed, orbing Billy into the blue and white bed. Luna then strode over to the edge of the travel cot. Billy watched as the demon used the power from her wand to create a top, matching the rest of the cot, that sealed the young witch in the bed. Locking Billy in place, Luna turned to leave, but just as she was about to close to the door, the demon turned to the fax machine. Frowning at Billy and then at the machine, Luna chewed her lip as she thought. "Heavy bear," Luna said, pointing to the ground with her wand. A large pink teddy bear with a goofy expression on its face appeared beneath the wand. It then orbed above Billy's head and dropped on the young witch. Billy found herself stunned and the bear landed on her. It was at least as heavy as the fax machine, and as her vision swam as Billy fought to avoid passing out with concussion, Luna exited the room with a smirk. Billy succumbed to her head injury mere seconds after that. Positive that her best chance to escape had just deserted her. Charmed Part 5. Phoebe and Piper grabbed hold of Paige as the charmed ones were lifted up and thrown apart by the onrushing tidal wave of incoming souls. Piper saw faces that she recognized from P3. Phoebe's empathic powers had her feel the confusion and pain of Luna's victims, and Paige had to suffer the worst fate of all. For it was her orbing power that allowed Luna to capture the souls and harvest them at a distance. And with such a momentous drain on the White Lighter's power, Paige felt every soul surging through her own body. Once or twice her sisters were forced to grab hold of each other to prevent Paige's essence from dimming into the shadows with the forgotten souls. When Billy came to the blue and white polypropylene prison was gone and she was once again in her cot at the manor. Her diapers felt grimy and used, much to Billy's chagrin, and Billy could feel the egg-sized lump on the side of her head pushing through her hair. Shrugging off her discomfort, the young witch pulled herself onto her diapered rear and began to work on a healing spell. There was no use in being half-cocked today. She decided it was better to be ready to go than not. As the healing spell drew to its conclusion, Billy heard excited little voices from outside her door. Obviously, Billy knew that inside the mansion she was as good as a baby because this was the Charmed One's power base, which meant that Luna's stolen powers would also be at their maximum here. The door was flung open and Billy watched as the tormentors, back in their little girl forms, rushed in, followed by Luna, who was smiling her wicked smile. Billy then found the cot spun upside down and she was dumped onto the floor. The tormentors then grabbed her by the sleeper's neck and dragged her off to the bathroom, all the while followed by a supreme-looking Luna. Billy was stripped of the sleeper and made to stand in the bathtub in nothing but her diapers. The shower nozzle hissed to life beside Billy Ann as the tormentors grabbed and pulled at the young witch in the pretense to be washing her. All the water that hit Billy's torso began to drip down her body and into the young witch's diapers. As the initial blast of icy water turned to a more pleasant heat, Billy could feel her inner diapers beginning to leak into the outer ones. Of course, this was invisible to the watching demons, as Billy was never held in one position long enough for her leaking diapers to be noted, although the taunts from the tormentors showed that they at least knew that her diapers were swelling with the water. With soap in her eyes, her hair pulled into tangles and reddening skin from where she had been pushed and pulled, Billy was in no fit shape to fight off the tormentors, but suddenly they stopped, leaving Billy to stand upright again and find herself face to face with Luna. "Not bad girls, but babies need to be cleaned everywhere," Luna commented. As if on cue, the sodden mass of diapers around Billy's waist finally gave up and the plastic mess fell. Hitting the tub with a wet thud, Billy stood helplessly naked in front of the demons. "Now do you see where you missed?" Luna asked. Billy found herself frozen as Luna clicked her fingers for a rag. One of the tormentors, Billy didn't see which as she had closed her eyes by this point, handed Luna the rag and the demon began to wash Billy's most private areas. Not daring to open her eyes until Luna was finished, Billy just chewed her lip to prevent the tears from coming. "Now I'll need your help to get our little baby ready. I need someone to get breakfast, someone to look out Junior's clothes for today, and somebody else to pack her diaper bag. Do you think you can manage that?" Luna asked. Billy heard 3 positive replies and was suddenly alone with the Luna. "Why are you doing this to me?" Billy dared to ask. She needed the information but had been afraid up till now of the consequences of asking. "It may surprise you to know that not all of my powers come from the Charmed Ones," Luna stated flatly. "And unlike you witches who have a fixed power base, some demons require outside influences for power. For example, my tormentors, as their name suggests, are fueled by negative emotions. Other powers come from different sources, so to me you are just a great big well of power." Luna cooed the last few words of the sentence as she orbed Billy back into the nursery. Lying on her back and once again strapped to the changing mat, Billy watched as Luna passed her wand over her, drying her instantly. Without touching the young witch, Luna began to orb diapers onto Billy, who could only struggle as diaper after diaper adorned her waist. However, as the 4th and final diaper appeared over Billy's swollen midsection, she realized that these weren't the overgrown convertibles she had been forced to accept as the norm. Instead of the usual white cloth-like covering, these diapers were plastic-backed and crinkly. The cartoon designs weren't those of trains and jack-in-the-boxes, but they were all witch-based with wands, black cats, and pointy hats. The diapers were also fastened by 3 sets of tapes, each one a different color, a bright pink, yellow, and orange respectively, and they weren't resealable. Apparently Billy was in these diapers until she really had to come out of them. Unbeknownst to the young witch, each diaper proudly displayed Billy's name in an upwards arch across her backside. As the tormentor in the soccer shirt entered the room, Luna orbed Billy into a standing postillon as she inspected the outfit that the tormentor had selected. Nodding and clucking her approval, Luna began to orb the clothing around Billy. The white Teletubbies t-shirt around Billy pressed her chest down and didn't cover the top of her navel, fully exposing the witch-patterned waistband of Billy's diapers. However, both garments were covered by the pink corduroy shortals. Although Billy guessed that the widely spaced snaps would reveal a lot of her diapers if they were ever to be used. Finding herself being dragged downstairs, Billy tried not to fuss about her lack of shoes or the fact that her hair had once again been left to hang in ragtails. As she stumbled downstairs, the young witch could really appreciate the difference between these diapers and the ones she had been forced to get used to. The deep, wide crotch signaled that these diapers could hold a lot, and instead of the quiet rustling of the other diapers, Billy's movements were accompanied by a loud plastic crinkle, like that of a plastic bag, with every waddling step she took. She really shouldn't have worried about her lack of shoes though, because as she found herself dumped in the overgrown highchair and strapped in, Billy watched as two tormentors approached her, brandishing white strappy sandals and some blue ribbon for her hair. As Billy's toes were pointed into the sandals and her hair was combed into childish pigtails, the young witch could only watch in horror as an overfull bowl of Cheerios placed on the tray in front of her. With no spoon forthcoming, Billy sat patiently as Luna approached with the racing car-shaped one that Piper had used on the boys. "Now come on, Junior, open up the garage for the racing car," Luna taunted. Billy didn't need to be warned. One way or another she would have been forced to eat the meal, so she did it with quiet dedication, making sure not to spill any of the cereal as Luna hadn't provided her with a bib. "Such a big girl now, aren't we?" Luna cooed. "You didn't even need a bib anymore. Maybe you'll grow out of diapers soon." Luna laughed. Billy found her stomach cramping and she was sure she was about to mess herself. "Maybe not." Luna smiled. As the demon turned away, she picked up the diaper bag. "We're good to go." "Excellent. Let's get in the car then." As she was orbed into the car seat, Billy felt her stomach twist again. Luna had given her no clues as to where the demon was taking her. At the very least, she'll be away from the manor, thought Billy as the engine started and Billy's seat began to gently vibrate with the engine revs. Of course, any chance Billy had of having a quiet trip was taken away from her by the three tormentors sitting in the back of the car, and as the pacifier was forced between Billy's lips, the tormentors began to try and tickle their captive with their claws. Piper and Paige had been deep in thought as to how they could help Billy since the last onslaught of souls had entered the space. Strangely, sleep and eating held no meaning in this place, but that was of little consolation at the moment. Phoebe, however, had gained a large insight into how Luna's, and especially her wand's, powers worked. It was because of this insight that she had been interrogating Gronders for the last 5 hours straight. "You still have answered my question," Phoebe stated. "I thought I did," Gronders countered. "Honestly?" Phoebe frowned. "Oh, what the hell, it's not like you can vanquish me here," Gronders stated. "So my powers come from the tormentors. As their name suggests, they feed off negative emotions. They can take any form they choose or whoever they listen to tells them to. They're really quite smart and they have the ability to heal each other by merging. When they do this, they also become more powerful. They sound pretty lethal." "How come you haven't tried to take over the world?" Phoebe questioned. "Because they are really bad," Gronders moped. "If they become too powerful, then you can't control them. They are smart enough to work by themselves or in packs, and once they're out, you either have to have enough power to call them back or you destroy them. And, well, say I was to go and try and take over a big city. The tormentors get more powerful. Lots of people, lots of power. They get stronger. Too strong for me to call them back. Now I'm the only one who knows how to stop them, or could theoretically do. So they turn on me. What powers do I have to get rid of them? Make more tormentors. Now they will compete against each other for power, but in that situation I'm willing to bet they're smart enough to merge with each other. Meaning I can't do a damn thing to stop them. So effectively you couldn't stop your powers. No. No, I couldn't. You happy now? Gronders sulked. This is why I don't try and take over, and everybody knows it. I'm a laughingstock, even amongst vanquished demons. Phoebe looked at Gronders for a while. The salience between them making the fat demon uncomfortable. What you thinking? Gronders asked nervously. How would you like to become a legend in the pit? Phoebe asked. Yeah, sure. The charmed one's helping a demon. Gronders snorted. Think about it. Phoebe said before floating away to confer with her sisters. Billy watched the city roll by. When the car finally stopped at its destination, Billy recognized it as one of the parks way across town. Billy wondered why she had been taken here, but as she was orbed beside the car, Luna preferring this to actually trying to lift the young witch out of the car seat. As the tormentors piled out of the car, Billy found her hand tightly grasped by Luna. Looking up at the demon, Billy received a warning glance and with a sigh allowed herself to be dragged into the park. Clearly when Luna had been absorbing souls, she had also been gleaning information, as when Billy rounded the hedgerow into the park she saw a brand new play structure waiting for her. In fact, it wasn't just one play structure, there were 3. Each one was designed for different ages and had a large sandpit surrounding it to prevent any trips or falls from skinning knees. The play structures themselves were made of bright plastics and clear plexiglass, allowing for excellent visibility for the watching parents who could sit on the large benches or even the grass in front of the sandpits. Billy watched as she saw a couple of volunteers who were clearly responsible for ensuring that the sugar-fueled, overexcited children remained on the correct play structure, remove shoes and help children find their feet. Ironically, Billy felt comforted by this. There was no way the Luna could claim that Billy was of the right age even for the oldest play structure, as she was just too big. The world seemed to draw to an eerie quiet as Billy approached the play structure for the children 3 and under. As Billy looked around at the people who were now frozen in place, she stared back at Luna and her tormentors. And I bet you thought you were too big to play with the other babies. Luna smiled as she slapped a daisy sticker on the front pocket of Billy's pink shortals. As soon as the sticker hit Billy's shortals, the young witch found her shoulders being squeezed by the straps of her shortals. The straps began to apply constant pressure across her shoulder blades, and as Billy lifted her arms to try and pull the straps away from her, the young witch felt like her chest was being squeezed in a vice. The whole outfit was slowly compressing on itself, and for once Billy was glad of her thick diapers provided her with some protection from the crushing pressure. As the ridiculous outfit began to compress on Billy's lungs and other vital organs in her chest, Billy found it difficult to breathe. Dropping onto all fours, Billy squeezed her eyes shut and concentrated on breathing. Feeling the oxygen burning in her throat, Billy spat out the pacifier and began to wail. With the lack of oxygen, her vision swam as the world around her began to feel bigger. Clearly the lack of oxygen was affecting her brain, because it appeared that Luna's legs were getting bigger and thicker. Shutting her eyes again, Billy concentrated on keeping her heart nourished with oxygen. There was no chance of conjuring a countering spell, the pain was too intense. Eventually it subsided and Billy dared to open her eyes and look up at Luna. Only now she had a long way to look up. As the world around her became unfrozen, Billy found out what it was like to be to the size of a small infant. Running her hands along her body, Billy realized that she hadn't actually been transformed into a baby. Instead, she had just been scaled down, in the reverse process than what happened to the diapers she was put in. Billy then found herself scooped up by Luna, who smiled at the blinking girl who was clearly trying to accept the difference between what she had been looking at before she was frozen and now what she was being presented with. As Luna approached, the girl shook her head and her smile returned. Taking the frozen Billy from Luna's arms, she quickly removed the shrunken witch's sandals and set her down on her feet. Billy took a couple of waddling steps away from Luna, then spying a gap in the plastic structure began to charge towards it. Even if she was shrunk, Billy hoped that she might be out of range enough to escape the demon. The gap, Billy realized was a gate, and as her tiny legs powered her towards it, her escape route was shut off as another one of the supervising girls re-entered the play area. Finding herself stranded in the middle of the sandpit, Billy suddenly felt very alone and very small. It was then she heard footsteps on the warm sand behind her. Turning around, Billy realized that whilst she might be the oldest girl in the play area, she certainly wasn't the biggest. Towering head and shoulders above her was round 3-year-old girl in a white summer dress with yellow trim, dirty yellow hair and a malicious smile on her face. "Look at the little baby," the girl boomed. Even her voice was bigger than Billy. "Aren't you cute?" She smiled, leaning forward so she could stare at Billy with her piggy little eyes. Her silver eyes. "She's a tormentor," Billy thought. "I'm Bertha." The girl boomed again. "I want you to be my friend." Gritting her teeth around the pacifier, Billy sensed she really had no choice. This girl was huge. "Okay." She gurgled around her pacifier. "You talk silly." Bertha giggled, placing her massive hand on Billy's back and pushing her onwards. Taking Billy to an abandoned corner of the sandpit, Bertha presented the young witch with a bucket and spade. Seeing that she had no real choice, Billy took the bucket and began diligently filling it with sand. "No, no, no," Bertha began. "You're doing it all wrong." She finished picking up the bucket. Placing one of her massive hands on Billy's back, she pushed the young witch's face into the sand. Flipping Billy over, who found herself pinned by the tight shortles and the larger girl's size, Bertha reached for the snaps on Billy's crotch. Squirming to no avail, Billy found her diapers revealed to the larger girl, whose sausage-like fingers deftly flicked the shrunk witch back onto her front. Feeling the rear of her diapers move away from the small of her back, Billy continued to try and struggle without any success. As the sand began to flow down on over her exposed skin like a fluid, Billy just lay still and accepted it. Once the bucket was empty, Billy offered no resistance as Bertha picked her up and refastened the snaps of Billy's shortles. "Do it properly," Bertha ordered. Billy stared at the tormentor with hate-filled eyes. Picking up her shovel once again, she began to dig into the sand again. Bertha sighed and moved back towards Billy. Not to be caught by the same trick twice, Billy took the spade and hurled it at Bertha's face, blinding her with sand. Dropping the spade, Billy then turned and sprinted towards the play structure. The sand shifted quickly in the back of Billy's diapers, working its way around her skin, irritating it. The plastic of the diapers made them uncomfortable and clammy, but the young witch simply ignored this and powered onto the play structure. Skidding onto the first level of the structure, Billy immediately headed up the nearest ladder, her diapers swaying as she climbed up to a vantage position from where she could watch for Bertha and any other tormentors.